Chapter 852. Just as Tai Yu channeled the spiritual energy in his body to transmit his voice to the outer palace of Yi Yang Palace, the smile on Cicada's face could no longer be maintained. He could not help but turn his head to look at Iron Prison, revealing a speechless expression. Cicada Cry had always had a question, and that was, what was Iron Prison's brain made of? Half a year ago, a pinnacle Class 4 creation master in the outskirts of the royal capital caused the Moon Empress to make a move. Now, in this great Evolutionist assembly, he even publicly declared that whoever defeats Night-Leaning Moon's disciple will be accepted by my Iron Prison as my disciple. Cicada Cry simply didn't know what to say about Iron Prison's despicable behavior. Based on Cicada Cry's understanding of Iron Prison, he knew that Iron Prison definitely did not have any intention of intentionally targeting Night-Leaning Moon. However, in the eyes of others, this kind of brainless action was a provocation to Night-Leaning Moon. How could a disciple that Night-Leaning Moon had trained for a period of time be defeated so easily? Cicada Ming had privately advised Iron Prison countless times not to be so straightforward and to consider the ways of the world. However, Iron Prison only knew how to nod his head every time. He would throw his words to the back of his mind. Even if Night-Leaning Moon's temperament was softer than the Moon Empress, she still didn't have a good temper. Sure enough, while the cicada was in deep thought, Night-Leaning Moon's cold voice rang out. Hihi, Iron Prison, I didn't know that your standards for accepting disciples are so high. I'm just afraid that your plan to find a disciple in the NYX assembly will fail. Night-Leaning Moon furrowed her brows as she spoke. She was clearly talking to Iron Prison, but she did not even look at him. It was obvious that he despised the Iron Prison. Night-Leaning Moon felt that she shouldn't let a person like him, who had no EQ and didn't even know how to speak, appear in Yi Yang Palace. However, since they were both His Majesty, it wouldn't be good for him to kick Iron Prison out right now. Upon hearing Night-Leaning Moon's words, Iron Prison was slightly startled. His face revealed a suspicious expression as though he was owed 2,500,000 radiance dollars. He didn't understand why Night-Leaning Moon was targeting him. Furthermore, the one who usually targeted him wasn't the Night-Leaning Moon but the Moon Empress. When he heard Night-Leaning Moon say that his plan to take in a disciple was about to fail, Iron Prison subconsciously replied, "Since I want to accept a disciple, my plan to accept a disciple will not easily fail." Cicada Cry had been looking at Tai Yu's expression since he started speaking. He knew that Iron Prison wasn't purposely going against Night-Leaning Moon, he just answered her question without thinking. But no matter how he said it, it sounded like he was being stubborn. Night-Leaning Moon was also aware of Iron Prison's problem and had often helped Iron Prison and the Moon Empress to smooth things over. If it was any other time, Night-Leaning Moon wouldn't bother with Iron Prison. However, Night-Leaning Moon had just accepted a disciple. Iron Prison's words sounded like he was saying that his disciple was not strong enough and could be easily defeated in the martial arena. Iron Prison wanted to accept a disciple, but he had to use his own disciple as a stepping stone. It was simply hateful. Night-Leaning Moon furrowed her brows and pondered for a moment. Then, her lightly furrowed brows relaxed. "Since that's the case, Iron Prison, I'll make a bet with you. If someone can defeat my disciple in this martial arena, I'll pick a material to make a treasured artifact and give it to you as a congratulatory gift for accepting your disciple. However, if no one can defeat my disciple in the martial arena, and you don't accept a disciple, you'll have to hand over the disaster insectoid hive body you have." Even if Iron Prison didn't have any emotional intelligence, he now knew why Night-Leaning Moon was targeting him. However, even if Iron Prison didn't have any emotional intelligence, he still wanted to save face. If they were at the Imperial Court Conference, Iron Prison might have given in. In any case, it wasn't embarrassing for his old friends to see him giving in. After all, he had to give in every time he argued with the Moon Empress. However, there were so many veteran factions and top-notch factions present in the inner palace of Nightfall Palace. Under such circumstances, Iron Prison couldn't just lower his head and give in. However, Iron Prison was somewhat reluctant to hand over the disaster insectoid hive body. It would be fine if he won, but if he lost, it would be the same as handing over a 6-star sacred source lifeform material to make a treasured artifact. Iron Prison pondered for a while before speaking. A bet needs to be fair. Since you want my disaster insectoid hive body, you'll have to hand over a 6-star sacred source lifeforms material to me. Night Leaning Moon let out a soft snort, nodded, and ignored Iron Prison. The bet between the two was officially established with Night Leaning Moon's nod. Cicada Cry looked at Iron Prison and wondered if Iron Prison was really a fool. The martial arena was not as valuable as the civil and martial arenas. Moreover, how could Night Leaning Moon not know how many trump cards her disciple had? It would have been fine if Iron Prison had suggested the bet, but it was Night Leaning Moon who had suggested it. Iron Prison actually dared to accept such a bet. Was he not afraid of losing his pants? Iron Prison sat on the 13th chair, wondering if there was a young fellow below the martial arena who could help him win the bet. He didn't expect that the Moon Empress, who usually ignored him, would suddenly speak to him. Iron Prison, since you're in the mood to bet, I'll also play a little. I heard that you recently obtained a sacred source lifeform. If you don't want to come, I'll bet on your sacred source lifeform. How about it? The Moon Empress words made Iron Prison's face darken. An uncontracted sacred source lifeform's value was completely different from a dead 6-star sacred source lifeform. A dead sacred source lifeform was a dead object, after all. At best, it could only be used as a treasure. However, an uncontracted sacred source lifeform was equivalent to an unknown future. Iron Prison didn't dare to casually use such an item as a wager. Moreover, Iron Prison had agreed to Night Leaning Moon's bet for the sake of his reputation. Now that the Moon Empress wanted to join the bet, Iron Prison could naturally reject her. Just as Iron Prison was about to refuse, the Moon Empress spoke again. I also know that you still have 2 Fays stuck at that level. If I lose, I can help those 2 Fays break through that limit. I will bear the cost of the resources consumed. The Moon Empress words immediately made Iron Prison lose his cool. Even though Iron Prison and the Moon Empress were both Her Majesties, Iron Prison couldn't say such bold words. In the Radiance Federation, only the Moon Empress, the Bamboo Monarch, and Chef Supreme had the courage to say such words. Now that the Bamboo Monarch was plagued by misfortune because of a woman, it was obvious that he had lost the capital to say such words. Experts at Iron Prison's level would form a perfect combat system between Fays. If the 2 weakest Fays could break through that limit and complete their metamorphosis, their overall strength would receive a comprehensive increase. Even if there was only a trace of such an opportunity, Iron Prison wouldn't reject it. The first was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 853. Iron Prison knew that even if he brought resources to the Moon Empress for help, the Moon Empress would not be willing to enhance his phase. Iron Prison might be stubborn, but he knew that the Moon Empress was annoyed with him. I accept the bet. Iron Prison, Chief Guard Yi, and the Moon Empress wager made the veteran and pinnacle factions leaders' scalp tingle. Was this the world of the big shots? It turned out that the world of the big shots was so boring and plain, they had casually placed bets on treasures, materials, and sacred source lifeforms as their wagers. Sacred source lifeforms were something that the veteran factions could not obtain even if they sold everything they had. Even among the pinnacle factions, only the strongest member of the family was qualified to possess it. When Iron Prison and the Moon Empress Night Leaning Moon made the wager, the veteran and pinnacle factions' disciples, who were originally hesitating, became excited when they heard Iron Prison's words. On the stage, Liu Jie's face froze behind the Spirit Guard's standard mask. He knew that after Iron Prison said this, the person who challenged him would definitely go crazy. However, Liu Jie was not nervous at all. On the contrary, his opponent's craziness was exactly what he wanted. Only a powerful opponent could let Liu Jie clearly understand how strong he was and where his limits were. Soon, another challenger entered the martial ring. Seeing this, Zhuo Ming immediately announced the start of the 3rd round of the martial ring. The third person to enter the arena felt that he had been too impulsive when he saw the 30 blade worms in front of Liu Jie. However, Iron Prison's words made it hard for him not to be impulsive. The youth immediately summoned his contracted phase. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan used true data to check the 3 tiger phase that the youth had summoned. Tiger species phase had potential that was comparable to dragon species phase. However, Compared to the huge variety of dragon species fays, tiger fays were much rarer. 2 of the 3 tiger fays that the youth had contracted had already become fantasy breed fays. Among them, the strongest tiger species fay had reached Diamond Eye Fantasy Eye. Such strength was obviously much stronger than Wang En, who had just fought with Gao Feng. If they were to really fight, this youth, who had contracted 3 tiger species fays, would at least be able to beat Wang En and the others. The strength of these 3 tiger species fays was barely enough to contend with the 30 Diamond X blade worms that Liu Jie had displayed. The Blade Queen Bee's exclusive skill, Vicious Wasp Queen, could ensure that the blade worm's grades would not drop, but after the transformation, each Diamond X blade worm was equivalent to a flawless fay. Each Diamond X blade worm was comparable to a Platinum 3 Fantasy Eye fay in terms of strength. The moment the 3 tiger species fays were summoned, the 30 Platinum 3 Fantasy Eye blade worms clashed with the youth's 2 fantasy breed tiger species fays. The youth's strongest Diamond Eye Fantasy Eye tiger species fay was undoubtedly much stronger than Zhu Luo's contracted Lava Dragon Lizard. However, the Lava Dragon Lizard was a defense-type fay, and it could rely on its shield to effectively defend against the blade worm's attacks with its sharp horns. Zhu Luo had been able to rely on the Lava Dragon Lizard to defeat so many blade worms because of its exclusive skill, Unyielding Iron Bones, which could increase its defense every time it received an attack. On the other hand, it was because Lin Yuan had given Zhu Luo a large number of Fire-type and Earth-type Heavenly Maiden-grade elemental pearls. This allowed Zhu Luo to use pure elemental energy and the Lava Dragon Lizard's shield regeneration to increase his endurance in battle. The youth's contracted tiger species fay was a power offense-type fay with relatively weak defense. Every time it swung its claws at the blade worm, the claws would be cut by the blade worm's black cuticle. Such injuries were nothing to a Diamond Eye Fantasy Eye tiger species fay. However, through the Blade Queen Bee's ability, Curse Bee Venom, every time the Blade Queen Bee's horn-like damage was dealt, it would constantly add mental poison and curse effects to the tiger fay's body. Looking at the situation on the battlefield, Liu Jie gently waved his hand. He immediately released 5 shield ladybugs from the dimensional light moth's body, and they joined the battle to protect the blade worms and attack the tiger species fay. The ferocious tiger species fay slowly fell into a disadvantage under the insect swarm's attack. Finally, Liu Jie commanded the Blade Queen Bee to use Disintegrate Infection on a severely injured blade worm that had lost its ability to fight. A large amount of mental poison sprayed on the tiger species fay. The tiger species fay was already starting to weaken due to the mental poison's interference. In addition, there were countless layers of curse effects on the tiger species fay. The Diamond Eye Fantasy Eye tiger species fay was knocked to the ground by the blade worm that had increased its strength by several times due to Disintegrate Infection. Seeing that its contracted fay had lost the ability to resist and was no longer a threat to Liu Jie, the youth immediately chose to admit defeat. The youth standing opposite Liu Jie immediately chose to admit defeat. After the young man left the arena, one of the blade worms that had been in a neat formation was now dead, and 7 were lying on the ground with serious injuries. The remaining 23 were also injured. 5 of the shield ladybugs that had joined the battle had been torn to shreds by the sharp claws and were no longer breathing. Liu Jie did not panic at all after experiencing the battle. He stood behind the blade worms with a calm expression. This scene also caused the younger generation of the veteran forces and top forces below the martial ring to become excited. Du Shuo and a few other youths were exchanging glances. Everyone could see the current situation of the martial ring. Although the weaker members of the veteran factions and the top factions would not be able to defeat Liu Jie, they would be able to injure Liu Jie's blade worms. Based on the current situation, the Blade Queen Bee's injuries could not be healed by the Blade Queen Bee. Furthermore, the Blade Queen Bee would need a long time to lay eggs every time. In the martial ring, the Blade Queen Bee would not be given a second chance to lay eggs. Hence, taking turns to fight against the blade worms was the best option. Thus, with Du Shuo as the leader, the youths dispersed and headed towards the other participants of the martial ring. These youths were all from the top factions. Very quickly, under the persuasion of these youths, the veteran forces and the disciples of the top forces below the martial arena united. It would not be easy for the weaker participants to kill Liu Jie. Hence, these youths became the best candidates for taking turns to wear down the blade worms. The second was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 854. The rest of the stronger participants were free to pick and choose when to step onto the stage. The method of persuasion was simple. There was no one in the younger generation who didn't want to become Her Majesty's disciple. Most of the weaker ones came from older factions. As long as they offered enough benefits, it was a win-win situation for them. Zhuo Ming, the left minister, was a little displeased, but he didn't say anything. This kind of behavior was very targeted at Liu Jie. It was like a group of brave warriors fighting a demon king boss. However, this kind of behavior didn't violate the rules of the martial arena. As the left minister under Chief Guard Yi, Zhuo Ming had to maintain his composure. He couldn't make things difficult for Liu Jie just because he was being targeted by the younger generation. Soon, the hesitant disciples of the veteran forces ascended the martial ring one after another, from the weakest to the strongest. Liu Jie ordered the Blade Queen Bee to cast Mother's Cry and Deconstruction Infection on the blade worms that were still alive but no longer able to fight. Normally, he would need to use up to 3 to 4 blade worms to defeat each opponent. As more and more people stepped onto the stage to challenge Liu Jie, more and more blade worms were consumed. The eyes of the participants below the stage grew brighter and brighter. However, Liu Jie didn't budge. By the time Liu Jie knocked the 8th opponent out of the arena, all 30 blade worms were dead. The blade worm carcasses piled up on the stage. It was a gruesome and bloody sight. When the 9th challenger stepped onto the stage, Liu Jie raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Liu Jie snapped his fingers and a black ball appeared next to his feet. This ball looked like a ball made up of striped worms, and it was squirming violently at this time. This scene shocked the participants who had just stepped onto the stage. It also made the hearts of the older factions and top faction disciples who thought they had seen hope sink. When Zhuo Ming announced the start of the battle, Liu Jie looked down at the wriggling black ball at his feet. Use liquid mycelium, stripe division, remnant body control, and saprophytic bacteria. Liu Jie issued 4 commands in one breath, and the black ball sprayed out a large amount of purple mucus under his command. This purple mucus seemed to be alive and had extremely strong extensibility. In just a moment, it had covered the entire area of the martial ring. Then, the thin layer of mucus carpet began to grow densely packed tiny black threads. These black threads were like capillaries, swimming and splitting rapidly in the purple mucus. As the purple liquid spread out, it naturally covered the dead blade worms and shield ladybugs. The 30 dead blade worms and shield ladybugs immediately began to change after being enveloped by the purple liquid. A large number of black threads drilled into the bodies of the dead blade worms and shield ladybugs. In the blink of an eye, the 30 blade worms and the 5 shield ladybugs were covered in a layer of purple slime and black silk. The armor caused the blade worms and shield ladybugs' bodies to suddenly grow bigger. Black blisters appeared on the black armor. When the blisters burst, they formed a mucus that looked like small white flowers covering the armor's surface, emitting a rancid smell. At that moment, the wriggling black ball at Liu Jie's feet had disappeared, and the 30 blade worms and 5 shield ladybugs had shakily stood up. They continued to form a formation in front of Liu Jie like guards. However, the blade worms and shield ladybugs that had become terrifying and disgusting now seemed to be stronger than when they were alive. Liu Jie's opponent was unable to block the swarm's attack and was knocked off the stage in a few minutes. However, the contestant's fate looked a little too miserable. There was not a single piece of intact flesh on the huge dinosaur phase body. Every wound that was pierced by the edge of the knife was festering towards the torso for some unknown reason. The 2 healing-type spirit chi professionals that Zhuo Ming had found were wearing the Spirit Guard's uniform. After a long time, they finally healed the phase. At that moment, Du Shuo, who had become the core of the crowd, exclaimed in shock. These are actually the mycelium tapeworms of the insect-type carcinoma Fae. Du Shuo's words completely extinguished the hopes of the other challengers below the martial ring. Most of them were veterans and the younger generation of the top factions. They naturally knew what kind of Fae the mycelium tapeworms were. It could be said that the appearance of the mycelium tapeworms had made the previous round of fights a joke. Lin Yuan was also using true data to check the mycelium tapeworms data. Fey name, mycelium tapeworm, Fey species, hookmouth genus nematode species, Fey grade, diamond, 10/10, Fey type, insect dark, Fey quality, legend abilities sad smiley liquid mycelium, rapidly secrete mucus and cover a certain area with mucus. It will cause the bacteria in the mucus to rapidly divide into a large number of reticular mycelium. Strip division, burrow into the liquid mycelium and undergo high-speed division, dispersing the body into tiny tapeworms that are rooted in any part of the mycelium. Mutilated body control, the mycelium infects the flesh that has lost its life and covers the surface of the flesh. The mycelium twines to form a highly toxic mycelium armor. When the mycelium forms an armor on the mutilated body, the split tapeworms can enter the mutilated body and control it. Saprophytic bacteria, a highly corrosive bacteria that will proliferate on the mutilated body. When the bacteria come into contact with fresh cells, it will cause the fresh cells to rot. Mutilated body integration, when the mutilated body suffers destructive damage, the ladybugs that are born will use themselves as nutrients to breed the mycelium. The mycelium will stitch up the mutilated body, and the newly split tapeworms will control the mutilated body. Duplex parasitism, when another parasitic lifeform has a parasitic body, the mutilated body, the mycelium, and the tapeworms inside can be sacrificed to enhance the strength of the parasitic lifeform. When the parasitic lifeform is injured, the energy obtained from the sacrifice can be used to heal the parasitic Fey. Exclusive skill sad smiley mutilated body reproduction, the bacteria can modify the reproduction and gender in the mutilated body's genes. It can allow the mutilated body controlled by the bacteria to reproduce into a new individual through mycelium division. Lin Yuan's eyes could not help but widen. Liu Jie had yet to display the true power of the Cancer Fey, mycelium tapeworm. At that moment, Liu Jie, who was standing on the martial ring, looked at the audience and spoke in a clear voice. Third. End of this chapter. Chapter 855. The next battle will involve the soul, and I am unable to control the depth of my attacks. If you get hit, even if you are healed in the end, you will still have to suffer a little. After speaking, a flickering soul shadow suddenly appeared on Liu Jie's shoulder. Finally, these orchid-like flickering souls gathered into a petite and elegant praying mantis that looked like an orchid. After seeing this petite and elegant praying mantis, the other challengers below the martial ring had a grave expression. When Liu Jie had ascended the martial ring to fight, he had summoned a total of 3 carcinoma Feys. They were the dimensional light moth, the blade queen bee, and the mycelium tapeworm. However, during the previous conflict, everyone knew that the mycelium tapeworm that Liu Jie had just summoned was the 4th insect-type carcinoma Fey that he had summoned. The dead soul caterpillar that Liu Jie had summoned earlier had yet to be summoned to participate in the fight. The dead soul caterpillar was an insect-type carcinoma Fey that mainly targeted the soul. Therefore, its attacks were very hard to defend against. The pain of the soul injury wasn't something that a regular person could endure. This caused the challengers below the martial ring to have the intention to retreat. The appearance of the mycelium tapeworm proved that it was a joke to use the tactic of taking turns to wear Liu Jie down. The challengers who were supposed to be taking turns compared their overall strength and realized that it was barely possible for them to defeat the resurrected insects. Furthermore, who knew if Liu Jie still had other insect-type carcinoma Feys that he had yet to summon? Compared to the serious expressions of the challengers below the martial ring, the youths who were going to participate in the civil and martial ring matches had different expressions. At that moment, the youths who were going to participate in the cultural relic duel ring matches had serious expressions and were also astonished. There were basically no creation masters among the challengers participating in the martial ring matches. Even if there were creation masters, their strength would only be below class 2. It was truly a stretch for such a creation master to detect the Diamond X Legend mycelium tapeworm. The youths who were going to participate in the civil and martial ring matches were all at least class 3. Therefore, they could vaguely detect the mycelium tapeworm's abilities and exclusive skills. The younger generation participating in both the civil and martial arenas were keenly aware that the mycelium tapeworm summoned by Liu Jie could actually coordinate with the dead soul caterpillar, achieving a complementary effect. The dead soul caterpillar was currently controlling the orchid petal blade Kai's body, but it was not bound to the orchid petal blade Kai's body. To put it bluntly, the orchid petal blade centipede's body was just a coat for the dead soul centipede, which could be changed at any time. The mycelium tapeworm's diamond rank skill, double parasitism, allowed the dead soul centipede to parasitize any blade worm or shield ladybug that had been infected by the bacterium. Coupled with the effect of the dead soul caterpillar's elite skill, the dead soul caterpillar could freely shuttle between each individual in the swarm. In any collision in battle, the dead soul caterpillar could suddenly appear like a nightmarish specter and absorb the soul of the target it was fighting. Moreover, there was no way to defend against the dead soul caterpillar's soul explosion bullet. Even if one could withstand the damage from the explosion, there was a high possibility that a soul seed would be planted in the brain of the battling Fae or even the spirit chi professional's brain during the process. As a carcinoma Fae, the dead soul caterpillar's terror level was no laughing matter. With a soul seed parasitized in one's brain, one's life and death were basically in the hands of the dead soul caterpillar. Miao Zhuo clearly had a treasure to protect his soul, but he was unable to resist the dead soul caterpillar's soul absorption. It was evident how powerful the dead soul caterpillar's control over the soul was. However, none of the challengers wished for their soul to be damaged like Miao Zhuo. Apart from the spirit chi professionals who believed that their strength was weaker than Liu Jie's insect swarm, even those challengers who were on par with Liu Jie's insect swarm did not have any means to protect their soul. Hence, the fire in their hearts was extinguished. Gao Feng retreated from the martial ring and stood beside Lin Yuan. When he saw that Liu Jie's insect swarm was getting stronger, he could not help but pat Lin Yuan's shoulder and say, "Lin Yuan, the young palace lord is too strong. Lin Yuan, the young palace master is too strong. With such strength, I really can't imagine how he can be defeated." Upon hearing Gao Feng's exclamation, Lin Yuan revealed a trace of a smile. He was happy for Liu Jie's strength. Lin Yuan knew that Liu Jie currently controlled a total of 8 insect-type carcinoma Faes. However, Liu Jie had only summoned half of them. Liu Jie had sealed the Insect Queen's ability from the start of the battle and allowed it to hide within the dimensional light moth's body. At first, he only allowed the Insect Queen to produce 30 shield ladybugs as hosts for the Blade Queen Bee to produce blade worms. Afterward, he only allowed the Insect Queen Bee to produce 5 shield ladybugs in order to increase the blade worm swarm's defense. If Liu Jie was willing to release the Insect Queen, the Blade Queen Bee would not be able to produce eggs in the following battles. With the Insect Queen working with the mycelium tapeworms and the pervasive dead soul caterpillars, its overall strength would increase by multiple folds. Liu Jie's Insect Queen was now a Diamond X fantasy breed fairy-type source-type life form. The insect species phase produced by each insect queen could reach the strength of Diamond X Flawless. A sea of insects made up of Diamond X Flawless insect species phase was a terrifying existence just by thinking about it. However, Lin Yuan did not agree with what Gao Feng had said. Liu Jie might be strong, but he was not so strong that he could not be defeated. Take Lin Yuan for example. If he were to enter the martial arena now, he would be able to destroy Liu Jie's insect swarm with just Spirit Essence Burst. Lin Yuan's Spirit Essence Burst focused on gathering spirit chi into a single point for an instant burst of power. It consumed very little spiritual power. In addition, the Dead Soul Caterpillar's soul attack was useless against someone like Lin Yuan, who had contracted a sacred source life form. A sacred source life form that had formed a marrow contract with a spirit chi professional normally resided in the depths of the spirit chi professional's soul. The existence of a sacred source life form was the best way to protect the soul. Furthermore, Lin Yuan had the support of the Myth 3 Vicious Venom Law, which gave him near-perfect resistance against the mycelium tapeworm's saprophytic bacteria ability. Liu Jie had yet to display his full strength, so Lin Yuan did not know how strong Liu Jie's sacred source life form was. In such a situation, if Lin Yuan and Liu Jie wanted to determine the victor, it would depend on whether Liu Jie could withstand Lin Yuan's trump card, the Jackdaw Withering Strike, which was produced by the Deathlaw world. Gao Feng marveled at Liu Jie's strength while observing the reactions of the other challengers below the martial arena. Suddenly, a strange thought arose in his mind. First, even more. End of this chapter. Chapter 856. If Liu Jie continued his winning streak, it would end at the end of the combat ring. Then, as the only person with a winning streak on the combat ring, Gao Feng would become the second place and receive the combat ring's reward. At the thought of this, Gao Feng couldn't help but laugh out loud. In the martial arena, one couldn't just forfeit without participating in the competition. Otherwise, Gao Feng wouldn't have been so conflicted back then. As soon as the 10th challenger entered the combat ring, he chose to admit defeat without summoning his Fae. After admitting defeat, the 10th challenger stared at Liu Jie nervously as though he was afraid that Liu Jie wouldn't agree to it. Liu Jie wasn't a cruel person, so he didn't reject his opponent's understanding. After the first challenger chose to admit defeat on the martial ring, a group of challengers lined up and rushed to the martial ring to admit defeat. There were only 75 veteran factions and top factions younger generation participating in the combat ring. Once they admitted defeat, there were less than 10 challengers left standing below the combat ring. Among them was Du Shuo, who had spoken rudely to Liu Jie and had been rescued by him. Du Shuo stood in the middle of these challengers, as if he was the leader of these challengers. Looking at Liu Jie, who was controlling the insect swarm, Du Shuo took a deep breath and walked toward the combat ring. When Zhuo Ming saw Du Shuo enter the combat ring, he snorted and said, "The 61st match of the combat ring officially begins." The 61st match of the combat ring officially begins. Liu Jie didn't make a move for close to 50 matches. He merely nodded repeatedly to allow his opponent to admit defeat. This made Liu Jie feel like a silly pillar standing on the combat ring. Liu Jie was slightly stunned when he saw his opponent enter the combat ring. This was because Liu Jie knew the opponent in front of him and had a conflict with him previously. Liu Jie might have a good temper and didn't let Zhuo Ming deal with Du Shuo back then. However, Liu Jie didn't have a good impression of Du Shuo, who had contradicted him. Just as Liu Jie was about to order the insect swarm to attack, Du Shuo shouted from the opposite side of the combat ring, "Young Palace Lord, don't be in a hurry to fight. Young Palace Master, don't be in such a hurry to fight. I would like to apologize to Young Palace Master here. I was wrong to offend Young Palace Master with my words. Young Palace Lord is magnanimous and forgave me and didn't pursue my responsibility. But I, Du Shuo, don't feel justified if I don't apologize." Du Shuo kept his back bent as he spoke. He only raised his head and looked at Liu Jie sincerely after he finished speaking. On one hand, Du Shuo was truly grateful that Liu Jie did not pursue the matter. Otherwise, he would have been thrown out of Yeyang Palace. On the other hand, Du Shuo also understood that the conflict that had happened in the outer palace of Yeyang Palace had been witnessed by many of the younger generation of the old and top forces. It was impossible to hide it. Sooner or later, the elders of the clan would know that he had spoken rudely to Bureau Chief Yi's disciple. Rather than waiting for the elders of the clan to find out and be punished, it was better to take this opportunity to say it out directly. If he took all the responsibility, he would not implicate Fang He. If he was lucky enough to obtain Liu Jie's forgiveness, then the punishment he would receive upon returning to Hearthstone would not be as severe. After hearing Du Shuo's words, Liu Jie's face behind the mask was very calm. "It doesn't matter. I didn't take this matter to heart, so there's no need to talk about forgiveness. If there's a chance in the future, we can communicate more." Du Shuo clenched his fists tightly when he heard Liu Jie's words. He looked at Liu Jie with gratitude once again. Liu Jie's words meant that Liu Jie did not care about his rebuttal at all, which was equivalent to him not admitting to the conflict. This directly exempted him from the punishment he would receive upon returning to the clan. At the same time, Liu Jie's invitation to communicate more was equivalent to Du Shuo turning an enemy into a friend. However, Du Shuo knew that even if he was a core member of the top 10 forces, he was not worthy of being Liu Jie's enemy. At this moment, Du Shuo could not help but admire Liu Jie's magnanimity. Du Shuo said awkwardly as he recalled how he had fought Liu Jie in consecutive battles. "Young Palace Master, I was thinking of taking turns to attack your Blade Worm Horde, so that they would continue to lose members. But I didn't expect your swarm to grow stronger. Liu Jie laughed heartily when he heard Du Shuo's words. Without the accumulation of consecutive battles, it would not have been easy for him to display his current strength. Zhuo Ming could not help but feel a little unhappy when he saw Du Shuo's small group trying to persuade the other challengers to take turns to challenge Liu Jie. However, Zhuo Ming did not expect Du Shuo to be so magnanimous as to tell Liu Jie about the previous consecutive battles. Zhuo Ming could not help but change his opinion of Du Shuo. At that moment, Zhuo Ming saw Jiyu Lang returning to the outer palace from the literary arena through the long corridor. Zhuo Ming could not help but feel a raging wave in his heart. No one knew better than Zhuo Ming how difficult the literary arena's questions were. Zhuo Ming had checked every question in advance. These questions were painstakingly designed to test the creation master's comprehensive qualities in all aspects. None of the questions could be easily completed. In order to match the time and allow the literary arena and the martial arena to end at the same time, apart from controlling the difficulty of the literary arena's questions, each question had a huge workload. The martial arena was indeed about to end, but this was because Liu Jie was the second to enter the martial arena and began to sweep through all the challengers. In addition, the 50 challengers had chosen their opponents as soon as they entered the martial arena. From the start of the martial arena until now, the martial arena had only used half an hour. In other words, Jiyu Lang had only used half an hour to complete the literary arena's questions that were randomly selected. This speed was simply too fast. Jiyu Lang was indeed the Bamboo Monarch's disciple. The Bamboo Monarch was not surprised to see that Jiyu Lang was the first to complete the literary arena's competition. However, the Bamboo Monarch felt that it was a pity that Jiyu Lang did not participate in the martial and civil arenas. The Bamboo Monarch had participated in setting the rules for the martial and civil arenas. A large part of the reason why the Bamboo Monarch had set the rules for the martial arena was to take care of his disciples' one-wave style's fighting style. After Jiyu Lang returned, he immediately went to Zhong Ziyi's side. Seeing that Zhong Ziyi was staring at the martial arena with fanatical eyes, Jiyu Lang could not help but reach out to knock on Zhong Ziyi's half-body armor. However, Jiyu Lang realized that his action of knocking on the half-body armor did not make Zhong Ziyi come back to his senses. Jiyu Lang sighed. Zhong Ziyi might be strong, but if he did not change his battle maniac habit, it would eventually be a bad thing. Jiyu Lang knew that he could not change Zhong Ziyi's bad habit, but he sincerely hoped that someone could change Zhong Ziyi's battle maniac habit in the future. Otherwise, the impulsive and battle maniac Zhong Ziyi would never be able to blend into a 5-man squad and was destined to never become a Radiance envoy. The second was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 857. Jiyu Lang returned to the outer palace to complete the civil and martial arenas duel, which was naturally seen by everyone. The veteran factions and the top faction's disciples who were participating in the civil and martial arena let out a sigh of relief when they saw Jiyu Lang. Jiyu Lang going to participate in the civil arena competition was a nightmare for the civil arena challengers, but it was a blessing for the civil and martial arena challengers. Lin Yuan looked at Jiyu Lang and said to himself, Long Dao should be coming out soon. During the chat, Long Dao had told Lin Yuan about his trump card as a creation master. It was a source-type lifeform, the bile dragon trilobite, that he had contracted since he was young. After devouring the gallbladders of dragon species phase, the bile dragon trilobite would secrete a kind of oil. This oil might not be able to increase the fusion rate of spiritual ingredients, but it could accelerate the formation of spirit liquid. It could be said that the bile dragon trilobite was a great help for speed competitions. Long Dao was now a pinnacle class 3 creation master, but he still could not be compared with Jiyu Lang with the bile dragon trilobite. It was obvious how powerful Jiyu Lang was among the creation masters. He was definitely at the standard of a class 4 creation master. He was going to compete with Zhong Ziyi as a creation master in a while, and this made him feel a trace of pressure. He knew that his standard as a creation master depended entirely on his physique. Even with genius help, he could not be compared with a class 4 creation master in many aspects. Therefore, he had to rely on his luck later. He wanted to see if he could rely on his luck to draw a question that he was good at. At that moment, Du Shoror had already summoned his phase, a Diamond 7 Fantasy 2 Radium Uranium Sea Lion and a Diamond 3 Fantasy Eye Horned Dolphin. Du Shoror obviously had contracted more than 2 phase. However, phase below Diamond Fantasy breed would immediately be infected by the mycelium tapeworm's purple viscous fluid when they appeared on the battlefield, causing their bodies to be covered with mycelium. Lin Yuan used true data to check the Radium Uranium Sea Lion and Horned Dolphin's true data. He immediately knew why Du Shoror had the courage to challenge Liu Jie. Du Shoror had obviously used Starlight Jitan's pollen for the rolling grade. It was almost impossible for a spirit chi professional at Du Shoror's age to reach A rank. The Radium Uranium Sea Lion was just like its name. It would usually devour some radium uranium steel, which even myth breed phase could only leave scars on. Then, it would take a long time to absorb the radium uranium steel and strengthen its own defense. The Radium Uranium Sea Lion might be a power offense type Fae, but its skin was covered with a thin layer of radium uranium steel, allowing it to possess superior defense compared to Faes of the same grade. He was more familiar with Du Shoror's other contracted Horned Dolphin. If the Horned Dolphin that Du Shoror contracted was lucky enough to advance to a mythical breed and awaken the ancient whale bloodline in its body, it would most likely evolve into a horned grey whale. Meanwhile, the princess's dress was engraved with 3 rules provided by the horned grey whale family. Among the 2 Faes that Du Shoror had summoned, the Diamond 7 Fantasy 2 Radium Uranium Sea Lion was undoubtedly stronger than the Diamond 3 Fantasy Eye Horned Dolphin. However, if Du Shoror wanted to challenge Liu Jie, he would be relying on the Horned Dolphin's special exclusive skill. Protection of Water Thought. By sacrificing the horn, the bloodline power within the horn will activate the water element to form a protective layer. This protective layer can protect the target from mental and soul attacks. When the horn disappears, the target will no longer be able to maintain the protective layer's function. With the Horned Dolphin's exclusive skill, Water Thought Protection, Du Shoror wouldn't have to worry about the dead soul caterpillar's terrifying threat. He would let the Radium Uranium Sea Lion, which had the strength to crush the insect swarm, clash head-on with the insect swarm. Just as Lin Yuan was checking the true data, Du Shoror gave a loud order. Horned Dolphin, use the exclusive skill, Water Thought Protection. At Du Shoror's order, the Horned Dolphin's body, which looked a little grey, suddenly turned dark blue. The giant horn in front of it also turned from blackish-brown to reddish-gold. Suddenly, 2 golden shields intertwined with 2 dark blue shields rose from the horns. One of the shields covered the Radium Uranium Sea Lion that was charging towards the swarm. The other shield covered the Horned Dolphin and Du Shoror. The Horned Dolphin was fully activating its exclusive skill, Water Thought Protection, while Du Shoror began to command the Radium Uranium Sea Lion to fight with its life on the line. At that moment, the orchid petal blade centipede, which was originally standing on Liu Jie's shoulder, fell into his palm like a fallen leaf. The dead soul caterpillar turned into a soul shadow and silently left the orchid petal blade centipede's body. It was unknown which blade worm or shield ladybug it had burrowed into. Liu Jie gently snapped his fingers and instructed the Dimensional Light Moth. Dimensional Light Moth, spit out all the shield ladybugs in your stomach. Following Liu Jie's order, the Dimensional Light Moth used blink wings to fly not far from the bladeworms and shield ladybugs that were infected by mycelium and parasitized by the dead soul caterpillars. With each contraction of its abdomen, 10 shield ladybugs were spilled out. The Dimensional Light Moth contracted its abdomen 10 times, and 100 shield ladybugs directly surrounded the Radium Uranium Sea Lions with their flesh and blood, stopping the Radium Uranium Sea Lions from advancing. Du Shoror was stunned by the scene. He felt that Chief Guard Yi's disciples' method of controlling insect swarms was rather familiar. These goddamn shield ladybugs had already been summoned to a total of 135. Who could tell him where these shield ladybugs had come from? Liu Jie wasn't a creation master and didn't know the characteristics of the Water Thought Protection. However, Liu Jie had already used the Dead Soul Caterpillar to launch a sneak attack on the Radium Uranium Sea Lion. This sneak attack hadn't been successful as it had been obstructed by the Radium Uranium Sea Lion's protective layer. Liu Jie's expression couldn't help but darken. If the Dead Soul Caterpillar's attack wasn't effective, he would have to summon even more insect-type carcinoma phase or even expose the insect queen in order to defeat Du Shoro. However, Liu Jie, who had rich combat experience, keenly noticed that as the dead soul caterpillar attacked, a small area at the front of the horned dolphin's horn had turned into powder. Seeing this, Liu Jie revealed a smile behind his mask. Liu Jie circulated the spiritual power in his body and gave the final command to the insect swarm. Mycelium tapeworm, use double parasitism. Dead soul caterpillar, use soul tempering. Soul explosion death bullet. At Liu Jie's command, one of the blade worms in the swarm suddenly swelled up a little. The black mycelium on the surface of its body started to swim frantically, and at the same time, its body flickered with soul shadows. The mutated blade worm charged straight at the radium-uranium sea lion and suddenly self-destructed while fighting with it. Third. Finally, I'm almost done explaining Liu Jie's strength. I really like Liu Jie. Is it better for your style to be more warm or hot-blooded? Let's hear everyone's opinions. End of this chapter. Chapter 858. A large number of soul shadows crashed into the radium-uranium sea lion, but the radium-uranium sea lion did not seem to be affected by the soul shadows. At the same time, the horned dolphin let out a pained cry. Its golden horn suddenly lost 1/10 of its original length. Liu Jie didn't need to give the order to continue attacking. One after another, the blade worms went through the exact same sequence of events as before and crashed into the radium-uranium sea lions. The shield ladybugs that had surrounded the radium-uranium sea lion but were killed by the radium-uranium sea lion also stood up again. The series of self-destructing attacks did not give Du Shoro any time to react. By the time Du Shoro reacted, the horned dolphin's horn was only 1/10 of its original length. One more attack and the horn would be gone. Du Shoro hurriedly shouted, "I surrender." The moment Du Shoro shouted, the blade worms that were already in front of the radium-uranium sea lion stopped in their tracks. The war with the Zergs had come to an end. The Zergs' madness and sacrifice had secured another victory for Liu Jie in the martial arena. Du Shoro was still thinking about Iron Prison's request to take him in as a disciple, but after fighting Liu Jie, he finally understood Liu Jie's strength. Du Shoro no longer thought about the impossible request that he could fulfill. Du Shoro recalled the horned pufferfish and the radium-uranium sea lion. He smiled at Liu Jie and gave him a thumbs up. "Young Palace Master, you're really strong." Liu Jie didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at his chest with a resolute expression. After Du Shoro exited the martial ring, the 9 younger generation members of the top forces who were still standing below the martial ring also revealed relieved expressions. The battle between Du Shoro and Liu Jie had taught the remaining 9 how weak they were. Therefore, the remaining 9 people decisively admitted defeat when they stepped onto the martial ring. Zhuo Ming looked at Liu Jie with a proud expression after the last person admitted defeat and left the arena. Zhuo Ming did not immediately announce that Liu Jie was the champion of the martial arena, but everyone present knew that the champion was the young man standing proudly among the Zergs. Regardless of whether it was the younger generation participating in the martial arena or the civil and martial arena, all of them came from veteran forces or top forces. Even among the veteran forces and peak forces, they were often the ones who received the most attention from the elders of their families. Outside, no matter where he went, he would be addressed as Lord, and was used to being fawned upon. However, at this moment, the invincible stance of the young man in the middle of the swarm was deeply imprinted in the hearts of the young generation of the top forces and veteran forces. At the same time, it also allowed the younger generation of the veteran and peak forces to understand what it meant to be a disciple of His Holiness. Night Leaning Moon, who was sitting on the 13th chair of Yiyang Palace, revealed a bright smile under her black veil. This bright smile on Night Leaning Moon's usually expressionless face was a bit abrupt, but this smile also perfectly expressed Night Leaning Moon's current mood. Even though Night Leaning Moon already knew of Liu Jie's strength, she was still happy that Liu Jie had become the champion of the martial arena. He was even happier than when he had won glory when he was young. The smile on Night Leaning Moon's face slowly disappeared as she turned to look at Iron Prison and said, "Iron Prison, after the Great Night Assembly ends, I will go to your place to retrieve the disaster insectoid hive's body." Iron Prison's face, which looked as if he was owed $2.5 million radiance, did not change, but his heart was already bleeding. It was fine if he could not take in a disciple because of this bet. Losing the disaster insectoid hive's body to Night Leaning Moon was a bit of a headache, but it was not of much use to Iron Prison. Night Leaning Moon wanted the disaster insectoid hive's body for her disciple to use. After the death of the 6-star sacred source lifeform, the disaster insectoid hive's remnant parts were quite useful to the insectoid species tumor phase that Night Leaning Moon's disciple contracted. It could even allow the strength of her disciple's contracted insectoid species tumor phase to increase in a short period of time. If the disaster insectoid hive's body was said to be a little painful for Iron Prison, then the sacred source lifeform bet with the Moon Empress was completely cutting his flesh. Iron Prison usually stayed in the Imperial Court and led the Imperial Court Guards. Although Iron Prison controlled the powerful Imperial Court Guards, the Imperial Court Guards were still a part of the Imperial Court. This meant that Iron Prison did not have his own private faction, and he had fewer resources than the Moon Empress, Bamboo Monarch, Chef Supreme, Chief Guardian, and that old fellow from Ostrich Logistics. Now that he had just obtained a sacred source lifeform, it was snatched away by the Moon Empress before he could even warm it up. Iron Prison turned to look at the Moon Empress with a slightly suspicious look in his eyes. Iron Prison felt that the Moon Empress had been eyeing the sacred source lifeform in his hands for a long time. If that was the case, even without this bet, the Moon Empress would have thought of other ways to take the sacred source lifeform from him. Just as Iron Prison was thinking, he heard the Moon Empress voice. Iron Prison, thank you for letting me win. Help me personally deliver the sacred source lifeform I won to the Radiant Moon Palace after the Great Night Meet, Luo Yunyang said. Upon hearing the Moon Empress words, Iron Prison's brows immediately furrowed. It was fine that he had lost the sacred source lifeform, but the Moon Empress wanted him to personally deliver the sacred source lifeform to the Radiant Moon Palace. She was simply too much. Just as Iron Prison was about to refuse, the Moon Empress turned to look at him with a complicated expression. After you deliver the sacred source lifeform to the Radiant Moon Palace, I will help you take a look at the 2 phases that are stuck at the boundary. However, you will have to prepare the boundary creation crystal yourself. With that, the Moon Empress turned her head and no longer looked at Iron Prison. The Moon Empress words made Iron Prison's furrowed brows immediately relax, and an incredulous look of surprise appeared on his face. The surprised expression made Iron Prison's face look much gentler. Iron Prison was the commander of the Imperial Court Guards, so he was used to seeing the world. However, at this moment, Iron Prison only felt that he had countless little question marks as if he was living in a dream. Since when did the Moon Empress take the initiative to give me benefits? Could the Moon Empress be an imposter? 8 years ago, he had personally gone to look for the Moon Empress with the boundary creation crystal in hopes of asking her to help his 2-phase break through the boundary. However, when he had climbed up the Leaning Moon Mountain step by step with sincerity and arrived at the Radiant Moon Palace's entrance, he had been greeted by 4 moonlight chains. The moonlight chains were very sharp and did not even give him a chance to speak before being chased off the Leaning Moon Mountain. The first time was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 859. Iron Prison's heart was still aching, and he was not happy that the Moon Empress had won his sacred source lifeform. However, he remembered that the Moon Empress wanted to help him look at the phase and asked him to prepare the creation crystal. This meant that the Moon Empress planned to help his 2-phase break through that boundary. Compared to the increase in his strength, an uncontracted sacred source lifeform was not that important in Iron Prison's heart. Iron Prison's feelings toward the Moon Empress became somewhat complicated, but he was already grateful to her. Behind the phone on the chair in the middle of the 13 seats was an old man sitting on a recliner in the Imperial Court. When the old man heard the Moon Empress words, his calm face revealed a surprised expression, which then turned into gratification. Zhao Xie, who had stopped being a Radiance envoy and still did things her own way, finally started to consider other people's feelings after becoming a master. The old man had never seen the Moon Empress disciple, but he had heard Cicada Cry mention that the disciple was called Lin Yuan. He also knew which one of the Night Dawn Palace Outer Palace Lin Yuan was. The old man looked at Lin Yuan and was a little curious about what kind of magic this young man had. He was actually able to subtly influence the Moon Empress character and temper. At that moment, the Night Dawn Palace Inner Palace's veteran factions and the top factions management generation all looked a little disappointed. The martial arena had ended, and Chief Guard Knight's disciple had obtained first place. Her Majesty had always kept her word, which meant that Iron Prison could not possibly accept a disciple in the Night Assembly. Thinking of this, the veteran factions and the top factions management generation looked at Gao Pei with some anger. With Night Leaning Moon's praise, the Moon Empress recommendation, and Cicada Cry's own words about being fated with Gao Feng, Gao Pei's son, Gao Feng, being accepted as Cicada Cry's disciple was basically a done deal. At that moment, a surprised voice suddenly echoed from the Night Dawn Palace Outer Palace. Yay! I, Gao Feng, am actually second place in the martial arena. After hearing Gao Feng's voice, the challengers who chose to concede in the martial arena looked at each other. These challengers had no intention of congratulating Gao Feng at all. They only felt that Gao Feng had gotten lucky. When Wang An, who was fighting Gao Feng, heard Gao Feng's voice, he almost could not help but reach out to slap himself. At that time, if he hadn't wanted to show off his strength, the second place in the martial ring would have been his. At this time, the Right Minister, Yu Zhe, was striding out of the civil arena examination area. Behind him was Long Dao and an extremely ordinary-looking woman. The woman looked about 24 or 25 years old, about the same age as Long Dao. The woman was also holding a thick book in her hand. Coupled with her calm expression, she looked like a bookworm who had studied too much. However, no one dared to look down on this ordinary-looking woman. At this moment, this woman and Long Dao were following behind the Right Minister, Yu Zhe, as they left the literary arena. This meant that this ordinary-looking woman and Long Dao had already answered the questions and passed the literary arena. In addition to Jiyu Lang, who had already returned to the outer palace of the Yeyang Palace, there were now 3 people who had passed the written competition. This meant that the Wen Arena competition was already over. However, it was unknown whether Long Dao or this extremely ordinary-looking girl was in second place or third place in the literary arena. After Yu Zhe led Long Dao and the ordinary-looking woman through the long hallway, the disciples of the top forces and veteran forces who did not complete the questions also left the literary arena dejectedly. After the written competition was over, the challengers who had yet to complete the questions lost the chance to continue in the Yeyang Palace's cultivation room. Long Dao passed through the hallway and arrived at the outer palace. He immediately saw Jiyu Lang, who was standing next to Zhong Ziyi and talking cheerfully. Long Dao's expression changed slightly when he saw Jiyu Lang, but he did not look surprised at all. Long Dao had already expected that Jiyu Lang would come out before him. However, at this moment, Long Dao desperately wanted to know when Jiyu Lang would finish the written questions. He wanted to measure the difference between him and Jiyu Lang. Yu Zhe brought Long Dao and the ordinary-looking woman back to the outer palace. Then, he turned around and walked to Zhuo Ming. Zhuo Ming and Yu Zhe were only responsible for presiding over the written and martial arenas. Zhuo Ming and Yu Zhe didn't need to announce the rankings for the written and martial arenas. When the NYX assembly officially began, the challengers who obtained the rankings would naturally be bestowed with honor, and they would be personally awarded by the chief guard. Just as this ordinary-looking woman was about to find an empty corner to sit down and flip through the thick book in her hand, her wrist was suddenly grabbed by Long Dao. This ordinary-looking woman's face revealed a trace of confusion as she looked at Long Dao with a puzzled expression. However, she stopped in her tracks and gracefully stood next to Long Dao. Although the woman did not say anything, the expression on her face was obviously asking Long Dao why he stopped her. Gao Feng, who was standing next to Lin Yuan, was excitedly waiting for Long Dao so that he could ask Long Dao what the questions for the written arena were. The written and martial arenas assessment method was the same as the written and martial arenas assessment method. The written and martial arenas assessment method could be considered a combination of the written and martial arenas assessment method. Since Lin Yuan was going to participate in the written and martial arenas assessment method, it would be better to ask Long Dao what the written arenas assessment method was so that Lin Yuan would have an idea. However, Gao Feng didn't expect to see Long Dao holding a woman's wrist in public. Lin Yuan, do you think Long Dao has taken a fancy to that woman who came out with him? Upon hearing Gao Feng's words, Lin Yuan reached out to touch the hair on the back of his head and didn't know how to answer for a moment. When Li Xian, who didn't have much of a presence beside Lin Yuan, heard Gao Feng's words, he couldn't help but cough violently. After coughing for a while, he said, "Don't worry, Long Dao can't possibly have taken a fancy to her." Li Xian's words were as sharp as steel. As Long Dao's childhood, little Li Xian simply understood Long Dao too well. Long Dao had always been a veteran beauty complex since he was young. When he was young, he was a little fatty. When he was 6 years old and slimmed down, his appearance started to reach the standard. It was also at that time that Long Dao started to play with him. Long Dao was already so harsh on the appearance of boys, let alone girls. Furthermore, even if Long Dao changed his aesthetics and stopped being a beauty complex, given Long Dao's steadiness, it was impossible for him to talk about matters of the heart. Thus, Long Dao's actions must have some other objective. Li Xian faintly felt that he had already guessed what Long Dao's objective was. When Gao Feng heard Li Xian's sharp answer, he looked at Li Xian with a suspicious expression and thought to himself. Li Xian couldn't be jealous, right? The second part was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 860. Before Gao Feng could think any further, Li Xian spoke again. From the emblem on this woman's clothes, she should be from the Veteran Spirit Healer Medical Center. The Spirit Healer Medical Center will be blessed in the future. The Spirit Healer Medical Center was a veteran faction that relied on creation masters, but they didn't do the business of nurturing phase. In terms of creation masters, the Spirit Healer Medical Center mainly focused on healing phase with damaged roots. It could be said that the Spirit Healer Medical Center's creation masters had chosen a good direction and had great potential. But as the Spirit Healer Medical Center didn't have a pinnacle Class 4 creation master, high-class creation masters didn't have much of an advantage compared to other veteran factions. As a result, the Spirit Healer Medical Center hadn't developed or improved for nearly 20 years. It had been a few decades since Li Yun Avian Domain had become an elite faction. After becoming an elite faction, Li Yun Avian Domain and the Coiling Dragon Valley depended on each other and didn't need the Coiling Dragon Valley's protection anymore. This allowed the Coiling Dragon Valley to choose a new veteran faction to support. This woman's creation master strength made Long Dao recognize the potential of the Veteran Spirit Healer Medical Center. As expected, Long Dao extended an invitation to the woman in front of him. "I would like to represent the Coiling Dragon Valley to officially extend an invitation to the Spirit Healer Medical Center. I wish to have an in-depth exchange with the Spirit Healer Medical Center and help it develop quickly." Long Dao didn't lower his voice when he spoke, and only the woman in front of him could hear his words clearly. Even the majority of the younger generation from the veteran factions in the Night Peak Palace had heard it. The veteran faction disciples looked at the ordinary-looking woman with envious eyes. Long Dao was doing this to declare his sovereignty and clearly express the Coiling Dragon Valley's intention to support the Veteran Spirit Healer Medical Center. After hearing Long Dao's words, the woman's eyes flickered. But when she thought of her status, she didn't immediately agree to Long Dao's words. The woman knew Long Dao. Even if Long Dao wasn't the Coiling Dragon Valley's young family head, just the fact that he was Sequence 3 of the Radiance 100 was enough for everyone to know. As the only direct descendant of the younger generation, Long Dao could represent the Coiling Dragon Valley as he wished. However, the woman knew that she had plenty of brothers and sisters in the Spirit Healer Medical Center. She had only been brought to participate in the Dark Knight Conference because of her creation master talent. She wanted to see if a pinnacle Class 4 creation master would like her talent and accept her as a disciple. But now, he had used his talent to attract the support of a peak power, Coiling Dragon Valley. This was definitely better than finding a pinnacle Class 4 creation master as a master. The woman's face couldn't help but reveal an excited expression, making her ordinary face look even more beautiful. "I need to talk to the elders in my family about this. They are all in the inner palace of Yeang Palace. I wonder if it's possible to have the elders of my family meet with you directly after the NYX assembly to discuss your suggestion just now," Long Dao said with a smile. Then leave me your phone number first. This time, the representative of Coiled Dragon Valley is my father. I'll contact you again after the meeting. After exchanging phone numbers with the woman, Long Dao walked toward Lin Yuan. Long Dao had used the source-type lifeform, the bile dragon trilobite, that he had contracted since he was young. It had also allowed the bile dragon trilobite to devour the secretion of the main dragon species phase heart. It could be said that it had reached its maximum speed. Although everyone had drawn different questions, Long Dao, who had finished the questions at his fastest speed, had just stepped out of the breeding room to confirm his second place when he saw the girl following him out of the breeding room. No matter what trump card the lady used, it was enough to prove her talent as a creation master. With such talent, Long Dao naturally wanted to pull him into his camp. Through this method of supporting a veteran force with potential, he could increase the overall strength of the Coiling Dragon Valley. Long Dao, who was beside Lin Yuan, hurriedly asked, "Brother, how long did that person take to complete the theory competition?" Lin Yuan knew that Long Dao would ask him this question, so he had accurately recorded the time when Jiyu Lang had just returned to the Outer Palace. Jiyu Lang's time to complete the martial arts competition was 24 minutes and 36 seconds. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Long Dao revealed a shocked expression. Using 47 minutes and 12 seconds was already his limit, and he had used half a main dragon species phase heart to achieve this speed. According to the time, even if Jiyu Lang didn't take half of the time he used to finish the exam, it would be almost the same. This made Long Dao feel like he had suffered a deep blow. Although obtaining second place in the literary arena was a delightful matter, his second place result couldn't even be seen in the dust raised by the first place result. Long Dao didn't know how powerful Lin Yuan's creation master strength was, but he knew that Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress disciple. Not only was Lin Yuan not weak as a creation master, but he also had his own trump card. Long Dao said in a deep voice when he recalled that Lin Yuan was going to participate in the civil and martial arena duels. "Brother, the questions for the civil arena are drawn from the beast-headed bronze statues in front of the breeding room. After drawing the questions, you will have to hand over the prepared spirit fluid in the Fey storage box under the right governor's inspection. Only then can you enter the breeding room to check your questions. You will then inform the spirit guard waiting in the breeding room about the content of the test. You will also need to request for the spirit guard to prepare the materials. My test is to upgrade 3 gold level 10 cold water white crocodiles to the platinum level." Upon hearing Long Dao's words, Lin Yuan immediately understood the difficulty of the literary arena's questions. It wasn't difficult for ordinary Class 3 creation masters to upgrade gold phase to platinum, but the test results were determined by the length of time. If Lin Yuan had drawn this test and Genius had concocted the spirit fluid, a single portion of high-grade Class 3 Cold Lake Elixir would be able to upgrade 3 Pinnacle Gold Cold Water White Crocodiles to platinum. However, even if Genius used the Golden Lotus Brocade, it would still require at least 2 hours to complete a bottle of Cold Lake Elixir. Even if Lin Yuan used Spirit Chi crystals to upgrade 1 Gold X Cold Water White Crocodile to platinum, he would need to use 10 Spirit Chi crystals. A total of 3 would be 30 Spirit Chi crystals, and Lin Yuan didn't have more than 30 Spirit Chi crystals on hand. Therefore, Lin Yuan, who had drawn such a question, could just give up. At that moment, the right governor, Yu Zhe, spoke up. Since the civil and martial arena duels have officially ended, the civil and martial arena duels shall begin now. Chapter 3. It's Chapter 60 again. If anyone has any opinions, you can say them at the end of this chapter. Button will listen to everyone's opinions. Good night. Pray that the surgery on the 15th will be successful. I also wish my friends who are taking the college entrance exam to get a good result. End of this chapter. Chapter 861. Hearing Right Minister Yu Zhe's words, Zhong Ziyi, who had just seen Liu Jie's killing spree on the martial arena, immediately rushed to Yu Zhe's back. Zhong Ziyi's actions caused the challengers who were originally participating in the civil and martial arena to reveal a trace of timidity. The left minister, Zhuo Ming, cleared his throat and said, "Previously, I only announced that the prize for first place in the civil and martial duel arena is a sacred source lifeform and a radiant light medal. I didn't announce the prizes for second and third place. I will now announce that the reward for the second place of the civil and martial arena is a chance to nurture a fey provided by the Chef Supreme. This opportunity can be to nurture a specific bronze legend fey or to prepare spiritual ingredients and ask Lord Bamboo Monarch to help the fey break through. Hearing Zhuo Ming's announcement of the prize for the second place in the civil and martial arena, it wasn't just Yiyang Palace's outer palace's veteran forces and the top forces' younger generation that were breathing heavily. Even the leaders of the Yiyang Palace couldn't help but gasp for breath. Although the reward for the second place in the civil and martial arena was not as good as the reward for the first place, it was equivalent to giving his faction a future. Zhuo Ming's voice sounded again before the crowd could sigh over the prize for the second place in the cultural relic double arena. The reward for the third place of the civil and martial duels is 100 drops of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar provided by the Moon Empress. Among the 100 drops of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar, 90 drops can cleanse the impurities on the physical body, while 10 drops can cleanse the impurities on the soul spirit. Zhuo Ming's words shocked the crowd once again. It was rumored that the Moon Empress silver stamen gold luster cassia had undergone a transformation, and these 10 drops of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar that could wash away the impurities in one's soul should have come from the transformed silver stamen gold luster cassia. Washing away the impurities in one's soul could increase one's understanding of the will of heaven and earth. On the other hand, it could improve the purity of one's soul. The purity of the soul was a prerequisite for contracting a sacred source life form. Forming a contract with a sacred source life form without a sufficiently pure spirit was very dangerous. When Lin Yuan heard about the reward for the third place of the civil and martial duels, he couldn't help but raise his brows. He didn't expect that the reward for the third place of the civil and martial duels would actually be provided by his master, the Moon Empress. Lin Yuan rubbed his chin awkwardly when he saw everyone else's longing expression when they heard about the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar. Sometimes, if one bowl wasn't enough, he would drink two. Yuzha said after Zhuo Ming announced the rewards for both the civil and military arenas. The assessment method for the civil and martial duels is the same as the civil and martial duels. However, the final ranking for the civil and martial duels is different. In a while, no matter how many people participate in the civil and martial arena competition, in the end, only the top 3 of the civil and martial arena competition will be chosen. The third place in the civil and military arena competition will be the third place in the civil and military arena competition. The top 2 in the civil and martial arena will compete in the civil and martial arena. The first and second place will be decided according to the results of the martial arena. Yuzha's words caused the younger generation of the top powers and veteran powers who were preparing to participate in the civil and martial arena to shiver. Except for people like Long Dao, who had enough strength, but chose to give up participating in the civil and martial arena and participate in the civil arena after weighing the pros and cons. The vast majority of challengers who were preparing to participate in both the civil and martial arenas were much more outstanding than those who were only participating in the civil or martial arenas. As long as a creation master was talented enough in a combat class spirit chi occupation, they would have the potential to comprehend a willpower rune. Then, in terms of combat, they would have an advantage that ordinary combat class spirit chi professionals couldn't compare with. During the process of combat, creation masters could use the creation master's abilities to carry out the most basic detection and consideration of the opponent's summoned phase. The creation master's ability to detect phase was far inferior to Morbius true data. However, before the battle started, the creation masters would still be able to take a step ahead to control the situation. However, the rules of the civil and martial arenas were truly unexpected. In the beginning, many people had guessed that the civil and martial arenas would use a point system. It might be a little troublesome, but it would allow for a more comprehensive selection of the creation masters with the strongest combat strength. However, the rules of the civil and martial arenas were too simple and crude. It could be said that the top 3 of the civil and martial arenas would basically be decided by the civil and martial arenas. Only the 2 strongest individuals in the civil and martial arenas would be qualified to participate in the civil and martial arenas. Even if creation masters' strength had always been valued more than their combat strength, there was no need to be so biased, right? The third place of the civil and martial arenas would only have to go through the civil and martial arenas and wouldn't need to fight. Such a competition method made many of the challengers who had participated in the civil and martial arenas feel that they had chosen the wrong arena. If they had known the rules of the civil and martial arenas, they would have participated in the civil and martial arenas no matter what. However, Long Dao, who had chosen the civil and martial arenas, didn't regret it. Long Dao understood that obtaining the second place of the civil and martial arenas was already the best outcome. If he had known the rules of the civil and martial arenas, he would have participated in the civil and martial arenas. Then, the bamboo monarch's disciple, Jiyu Lang, might not have chosen the civil and martial arenas and would instead participate in the civil and martial arenas. Jiyu Lang, Zhong Ziyi, and Lin Yuan, the three Class 5 Creation Masters' disciples, were basically the top three of the civil and martial arenas. The others didn't even have a chance. On the other hand, if Jiyu Lang participated in the cultural relic arenas, then he would be the champion of the civil and martial arenas. When thinking about it, Long Dao couldn't help but feel that his big chestnut was a little painful. The harsh rules of the civil and martial arenas were already causing people to involuntarily shrink back. In addition, before the rules of the civil and martial arenas were announced, Zhong Ziyi had already walked behind Zhuo Ming and indicated that he would participate in the civil and martial arenas. For a moment, the challengers who were originally going to participate in the civil and martial arenas were filled with pessimism. Especially those creation masters with weaker abilities and challengers with stronger combat strength. Their pessimism was even more obvious. The rules of the civil and martial arenas could be said to have killed the challengers' chances. Therefore, even after a few minutes, no one walked behind Zhuo Ming and reported to participate in the civil and martial arenas. It caused the situation to fall into an awkward situation. The cell phone that was placed on the chair in the center of the Night Palace's inner palace echoed again with a neutral and calm voice. The civil and martial arenas allowed this old man to see the talents and combat strength of the younger generation's creation masters. Our Radiance sect's younger generation is really getting stronger. The younger generation will surpass us in time. But why can't this old man see any courage when the civil and martial arenas have just started? At this point, the neutral and calm voice did not continue speaking. The first one was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 862. Upon hearing the old man's voice, the expressions of the other 12 abyssals did not change. However, the leaders of the veteran factions and the top factions behind the 13 seats could not sit still. These leaders also felt that the rules of the civil and martial duels were too f***ed up. However, the next moment, whoever stood up first and walked towards Zhuo Ming would be imprinted with a mark of courage because of the old man's words. The calm voice on the old man's cell phone said to the Moon Empress, you still haven't seen your disciple?" Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress rolled her eyes imperceptibly. When she heard that, the Moon Empress rolled her eyes imperceptibly. "What does it have to do with you whether this Empress disciple comes out or not?" In the Moon Empress' heart, Lin Yuan was not inferior to the others, but he was too young. Moreover, the Moon Empress did not intend to let Lin Yuan participate in these 3 duels. Just as the Moon Empress was about to answer, she suddenly froze. The Moon Empress realized that her precious disciple had actually made a move. Lin Yuan, who was in the crowd, took a deep breath and thought to himself. The rules of the civil and martial duels imperceptibly reflect the importance of a creation master's strength. In any case, he had to participate in the civil and martial duels. Not only for the sacred source lifeform, but also for the Radiant Light Medal. When Lin Yuan had been preparing to participate in the Radiance 100 sequence selection, he had not been strong enough. At that time, Lin Yuan had just obtained a Silver Eye Fantasy Eye Jasmine Lily. At that time, his master, the Moon Empress, had already mentioned the Radiance Envoy to him. When Lin Yuan had first heard of the Radiance Envoy, it had left a deep impression in his heart. As Lin Yuan's strength continued to increase, he could now pass the Radiance 100 sequence test with his eyes closed and become a member of the Radiance 100 sequence. Therefore, Lin Yuan's eyes were now fixed on the Radiance Envoy. The Radiant Light Medal from the civil and martial duels was a very useful help for him on his path to becoming a Radiance Envoy. Lin Yuan nodded at Liu Jie, Long Dao, Gao Feng, Li Xian, Sun Ningxiang, and the others before walking directly behind Zhuo Ming. Apart from the people in Lin Yuan's small group who knew that Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress disciple, they only knew that the chief guard's disciple was exceptionally protective of this youth. Upon seeing that Lin Yuan was going to participate in the civil and martial arena duels, the veteran factions and the top factions' younger generation members were astonished. Most of the people present had watched the all-star competition and knew of Lin Yuan's talent in combat. However, due to the rules of the civil and martial duel arenas that had just been announced, it could be said that the entire competition basically had nothing to do with combat ability. Unless he was able to place in the top 2 of the civil arena competition, there was no chance for him to display his combat strength. Moreover, the people present were not trash like Meng Shu from the Barbarian Snake Guild Club. Aside from Gao Feng, who had gotten lucky, anyone else would have been able to defeat Meng Shu within 3 moves. Therefore, he had always been favored by the younger generation of the top factions and veteran factions because of his talent and not his strength. Lin Yuan had just turned 18 after the new year. In addition, Lin Yuan looked rather young, so everyone felt that he was like a 16 or 17-year-old youth. Even if he had grasped the Creation Master's means in his mother's womb, his strength as a Creation Master couldn't possibly be that strong, right? Apart from talent, a Creation Master's accumulation of time was also indispensable. After all, not all Creation Masters were like the Moon Empress, who was already a 5-star Creation Master before the age of 40. When the challengers who were preparing to participate in the civil and martial arena duels saw Lin Yuan casually standing behind Zhong Ziyi, they couldn't help but feel that this youth wasn't a genius like the Moon Empress. For a moment, they couldn't help but feel that this youth wasn't thinking that he would be able to get second place in the civil and martial arena duels just because no one had stepped up earlier. Don't even think about it. Therefore, many challengers also stepped forward and lined up behind Lin Yuan. The Moon Empress didn't expect Lin Yuan to have the courage to participate in the civil and martial arena duels. However, this was also good. On the one hand, Lin Yuan could compete with the other outstanding youths. On the other hand, as his master, she could also know Lin Yuan's strength. At that moment, the Bamboo Monarch, Chef Supreme, Night Leaning Moon, Iron Prison, and Cicada Cry couldn't help but look at the Moon Empress. These 5 people had seen Lin Yuan before. Among them, the Bamboo Monarch, Cicada Cry, and Iron Prison looked at the Moon Empress and then at Chef Supreme with a playful expression. They didn't expect the Moon Empress disciple to compete with Chef Supreme's disciple. They didn't know who was stronger. At that moment, there was an exclamation. "Hey! Isn't that little Yuan?" It was a woman's voice that sounded a little shrewish. Then, a man's voice echoed. "Ying, it's really little Yuan. This kid actually went to participate in the civil and martial arena duels. After the NYX assembly ends, I can call little Yuan over to Kitchen Fragrance Palace to try my new red braised meat." Zhong Yingying and Li Zhonglin had been chatting with Wang Fuxiang and hadn't paid much attention to the martial arena duels. When they heard Zhongzheng's voice mention the civil and martial arena duels, they subconsciously looked forward. They didn't expect to see Lin Yuan. Upon hearing Li Zhonglin and Zhong Yingying's words, the veteran factions and the top factions management generation suddenly looked at Chef Supreme. It turned out that the youth who had amazed everyone at the All-Star competition was related to Chef Supreme, and it seemed like their relationship was very deep. From Li Zhonglin and Zhong Yingying's tone, they had directly treated this youth as their junior. Chef Supreme's eldest disciple, Li Zhonglin, had never given face to anyone, but now, he actually took the initiative to cook red braised meat for a youth. This was really big news. Although the veteran faction's management generation behind the 13 seats didn't dare to be as surprised as Li Zhonglin and Zhong Yingying in front of the 13 majesties, they could still talk normally. There were even quite a number of top factions and veteran factions management generation that started a few bets while watching the martial arena duels, betting on how many consecutive wins Liu Jie could win. At that moment, the management generation started to discuss Lin Yuan's identity softly. These discussions naturally entered the Moon Empress' ears, and she felt a nameless fire burning in her body. Lin Yuan is this Empress disciple. Chef Supreme's eldest disciple and daughter just happened to become this Empress disciple's neighbor when they elope. You actually placed this Empress disciple on Chef Supreme's side, and you didn't even ask Chef Supreme if he dared to accept her. Standing behind the Moon Empress, Mystic Moon and Mystic Moon couldn't help but have cold sweat trickle down their foreheads. Based on their understanding of the Moon Empress, it was impossible for the Moon Empress to remain calm when it came to matters related to Lin Yuan. The second, end of this chapter. Chapter 863. At that moment, Thunderous Battle, who represented the Five Emperors mercenary group, spoke to Long Tu, who was standing beside him. Old Long, look at that young man. He's at most 17 or 18 years old. Let's make a bet on whether that young man can enter the top 10 of the civil and martial duels. Long Tu quickly glanced at the Moon Empress and cursed Thunderous Battle in his heart for being crazy. Thunderous Battle was the second in command among the 5 Emperor-class experts of the 5 Emperors mercenary group. He was extremely strong in combat, but he was careless and lacked shrewdness. However, under normal circumstances, shrewd people would not dare to trick Thunderous Battle. Based on Thunderous Battle's question, Long Tu knew that Thunderous Battle had not paid attention to the rules of the civil and martial duels. The civil and martial duels were over once the top 3 contestants were confirmed. There was no such thing as the top 10. Do you think Thunderous Battle can rank the top 4 to 10? Moreover, there are only 11 people from the younger generation standing behind Zhuo Ming. You're betting on whether the Moon Empress disciple can enter the top 10? Isn't that the same as betting on whether the Moon Empress disciple will rank last? Before Long Tu could finish cursing Thunderous Battle in his heart, an imposing aura suddenly rose from a chair in front of him. The moment this aura rose, Long Tu, who was an Emperor-class expert, felt as though his entire body was being pressed into the depths of the sea. He could not breathe at all. Thunderous Battle, who was beside Long Tu, felt as though he was an Emperor-class expert. When he tried to circulate the spiritual power in his body, he felt that it was extremely obscure. After careful calculation, it was only about 1/10 of the usual speed. This shocked Thunderous Battle. It could be said that the might of this aura had exceeded Thunderous Battle's understanding. At that moment, a cold snort sounded in Thunderous Battle's ears. That snort might not have been loud, but Thunderous Battle felt that half of his ear had gone numb because of the sound of it. Do you like to gamble so much because you can take out a sacred source life form? If you want to gamble, let this Empress accompany you. Upon hearing this voice, Thunderous Battle immediately knew that the terrifying aura had come from the Moon Empress. Thunderous Battle grinned awkwardly. He did not know how he had offended the Moon Empress. He had come to the Imperial City with a mission. He was going to head up to the Leaning Moon Mountain to seek the Moon Empress' help. Furthermore, he wanted to see if he could exchange for a few golden lotus brocade stalks from the Moon Empress. The 5 Emperors mercenary group's creation master resources were already scarce. If they could obtain a few golden lotus brocade plants, it would allow the 5 Emperors mercenary group to have more creation master resources. However, for some unknown reason, he had offended the Moon Empress. Even though he was an Emperor-level expert, Thunderous Battle did not dare to put on airs. He quickly bowed and spoke respectfully. "I'm not betting anymore. Moon Empress, Thunderous Battle, am not betting anymore." Once he finished speaking, he added another sentence. "Actually, I don't usually gamble." Another cold snort shook Thunderous Battle's other ear until it was numb. Then, the Moon Empress retracted her terrifying aura. The Moon Empress' sudden rage silenced the entire Night Emperor Palace. Night Leaning Moon also turned her head around to cast a glance at Thunderous Battle. She felt that Thunderous Battle was practically the boss of the desert. Originally, he wanted to find 2 spicy strips to eat, but he accidentally entered the crater of the volcano. Zhuo Ming looked at the 11 Lives challenger behind him and asked in a clear voice, "Is there anyone else who is going to participate in the civil and martial duels?" After asking the question, Zhuo Ming saw that no one else came forward, so he turned and walked toward the civil and martial duel area. Lin Yuan followed behind Zhuo Ming. When he thought about how he would have to rely on luck to draw a question that he was good at, he felt a headache. He didn't like the feeling of having to rely on luck when doing things. Suddenly, Lin Yuan's eyes lit up. He might not have the mystical spiritual ingredient that could increase his luck, but he had the astrologer Ji Tan that could eliminate bad luck. Even if he didn't have the luck bonus, he must not be affected by bad luck. The astrologer Ji Tan was constantly growing in the spirit lock spatial zone. During the past dozen days, the astrologer Ji Tan had already bloomed for the second time. Lin Yuan had collected all the pollen left behind by the astrologer Ji Tan's first bloom. Lin Yuan shook his hand and took out a brocade box. This brocade box contained the pollen that the astrologer Ji Tan had condensed for the first bloom. If the astrologer Ji Tan's pollen wanted to eliminate the bad luck in his body, he would need to swallow the pollen with his mouth. Therefore, Lin Yuan casually used his hand to pick up a small pinch of the pollen and put it in his mouth. At that moment, Zhong Ziyi, who was walking in front of Lin Yuan, paused slightly, and he forcefully sniffed. He felt that there was a very faint fragrance in the air. Zhong Ziyi realized that this fragrance was very strange. When he smelled it, it actually calmed his restless emotions due to his desire for battle. Zhong Ziyi had always known that his desire for battle was the reason why his blood would boil uncontrollably whenever there was a battle. Part of it was because he liked to hone his skills through battle. Another part was because in the second year after he had become the disciple of the Chef Supreme, his master had brought him to the outer realm to train, and he had been cursed by an expert from the outer realm who had used the sacred source lifeform's ability. Even though that expert had been killed by his master, the sacred source lifeform's body had been refined into a treasure, and he had possessed it. However, there had been no way to remove the curse, and it was like a brand in his soul. In the end, this curse had imperceptibly turned into a kind of misfortune that fused with his soul. This curse had always been a thorn in Zhong Ziyi's side. When Zhong Ziyi turned around, Lin Yuan had already put away the brocade box containing the astrological wisdom epiphyllum powder. Zhong Ziyi was like a little wolf puppy, his nose wrinkled as he stopped in his tracks. When Lin Yuan walked to his side, Zhong Ziyi walked side by side with Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan could not help but feel a little strange as he looked at Zhong Ziyi, who was walking alongside him. She had just heard Long Dao say that Zhong Ziyi was not a person who was easy to get along with, but now, how could a person who was obviously not easy to get along with be so kind to her? Upon seeing Lin Yuan looking at him, Zhong Ziyi, whose nose was twitching, subconsciously said, "You're right. You smell so good." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan looked embarrassed and looked at Zhong Ziyi in surprise. He hurriedly took 2 steps forward to distance himself from Zhong Ziyi and followed closely behind Zhuo Ming. As soon as the words left his mouth, Zhong Ziyi immediately felt that his words were somewhat ambiguous. Just as Zhong Ziyi was about to continue walking alongside Lin Yuan, his thoughts paused. He thought about how the civil and martial duels were about to begin, and that he would not be able to say anything now. Zhong Ziyi decided to wait until the civil and martial duels were over. Then, he would get to know this young man whose scent could soothe his emotions. The 3rd round. End of this chapter. Chapter 864. After following Zhuo Ming through the long corridor, Lin Yuan arrived at another area of the Night Glory Palace. This area had many small rooms, and it was very similar to the rows of rented top-notch breeding rooms and observation rooms of the Fey Observer Association on the Creation Master Association's 3rd floor. Lin Yuan couldn't see how many rooms there were, but when he looked into the distance, he saw that this area was at least 300 meters long. According to the construction method of 1 breeding room on each side, there should be at least 60 breeding rooms. Each breeding room's door was carved with a different beast head, and each beast head was holding a dragon species phase head in its mouth. Lin Yuan sighed in his heart. How much does Chief Guard Yi hate dragon species phase? Zhuo Ming arrived in front of a bronze statue that was carved with a beast head and lifted it up with ease. He then turned around and prepared to let the challengers of the civil and martial duels draw a question. When Zhuo Ming saw Lin Yuan, who was first in line behind him, he walked over to Lin Yuan while holding the bronze statue. Just as Zhuo Ming was about to hand the bronze statue to Lin Yuan for him to draw a question, Zhong Ziyi took a step forward and took the bronze statue from Zhuo Ming. Zhong Ziyi took a step forward and took the bronze statue from Zhuo Ming before saying to Lin Yuan. Zhong Ziyi took a step forward and took the bronze statue from Zhuo Ming. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan gently thanked Zhong Ziyi and extended his hand into the bronze statue's mouth. He took out one of the many sheepskin scrolls in the bronze statue's abdomen. After taking out the scroll, Lin Yuan looked at Zhong Ziyi with some suspicion. Zhong Ziyi's actions could be said to be the same as fawning on Lin Yuan. Zhong Ziyi's sudden warm attitude toward Lin Yuan made Lin Yuan rather suspicious. Upon hearing Lin Yuan thanking him, Zhong Ziyi's cold face revealed a faint smile without a trace. Zhong Ziyi thought to himself, "It seems like this youth named Lin Yuan isn't angry because of my slip of the tongue. Otherwise, he wouldn't thank me." Zhong Ziyi also took out a sheepskin scroll from the bronze statue and handed it back to Zhuo Ming. Zhuo Ming didn't find it strange that Zhong Ziyi took the initiative to get close to Lin Yuan. They were both His Majesty's disciples and were of the same age. It was normal for them to be close. However, the challengers standing behind Zhong Ziyi, who had been curious about Liu Jie standing up for Lin Yuan, could not help but become even more curious. She did not understand what kind of magic this young man had to be able to make Chief Guard Yi's disciple stand up for him, and then to be so close to Chef Supreme's disciple. It was simply too enviable. There were only 11 people participating in both the civil and martial arena, so the examination questions were quickly drawn. Zhuo Ming looked at the time and said, "From now on, each of you can choose a breeding room. Enter the breeding room and open the sheepskin scroll to check the questions on it. Then, hand the questions to the spirit guardian outside the room. The spirit guardian will help you prepare the materials after obtaining the scroll. After preparing the materials, the spirit guardian will immediately leave your room and will not disturb you from completing the test." As Zhuo Ming spoke, he began calculating the time taken. Hearing Zhuo Ming's words, everyone chose a breeding room nearby and entered it. Although Lin Yuan still did not know what the questions on the sheepskin scroll were, his speed in choosing the breeding room was not slow at all. There were a total of 154 youths in the Yeong Palace's outer palace. Excluding the 25 challengers who were participating in the civil and martial arena, there were a total of 75 challengers who were participating in the martial arena. There were a total of 54 challengers who were qualified to participate in both the civil and martial arena. After knowing the harsh examination rules of the civil and martial arena, only 11 of them still chose to participate in the civil and martial arena. It could be said that each of these 11 challengers was the elite among the elites, and they were very confident in their strength. Even if Lin Yuan did not get first place in the civil and martial arena, he had to ensure that he could at least get second place. For this, he would not waste a single minute or second. After entering the breeding room, Lin Yuan nodded to the spirit guardian, who was waiting inside. Then, he untied the ribbon on the sheepskin scroll and looked at the questions on the scroll. When he looked at Lin Yuan, the solemn expression on his face disappeared. It was replaced by a relaxed expression. Lin Yuan saw the words on the sheepskin scroll. He upgraded 5 lop-eared electric rabbits from bronze, elite, to bronze, flawless, and healed one of the bronze, normal, lop-eared electric rabbit's fatal injury. Then, he upgraded it to bronze, flawless, like the previous 5. Before drawing this test, Lin Yuan had used the pollen condensed by astrologer Jitan's first flower to wash away the bad luck on his body. In other words, this test that Lin Yuan had drawn was guided by his body's providence. Before Lin Yuan had accidentally nurtured astrologer Jitan, he did not believe that there was such a thing as luck in the world. This was because luck was simply too illusory and difficult to materialize. However, since astrologer Jitan's ability was to remove bad luck, it indirectly proved that bad luck really existed in this world. Since there was bad luck, there must be providence on the other side. Especially after feeling the effects of providence, Lin Yuan decided to return to the return from faraway mansion to obtain more phase that could increase providence. For example, the 3 Mountain River Eternal Life Carps in the red sandalwood longevity fish tank could actually be considered a kind of providence fey. However, the Mountain River Eternal Life Carp's providence was targeted at plants, birds, beasts, fish, and insects. Its exclusive skill, Place of Life, did not have much effect on spirit chi professionals. At best, it would only make the life of the spirit chi professionals more comfortable. The providence phase that Lin Yuan was looking for could increase a spirit chi professional's providence. Lin Yuan had seen a few such fays when he had visited the rare lifeform pavilion previously. Each of them had a sky-high price, and Lin Yuan had only taken a few glances at them before they were taken off the shelves. These providence fays that were sold at sky-high prices in the rare lifeform pavilion were generally of very low grades. High-grade providence fays often existed in the hands of major factions. However, fays that could increase providence were truly rare. Even if the price was extremely high, there were still no factions that would nurture such fays as their own function. Generally, when a faction's function was developed to a certain extent, it could develop a second or even a third function. Take the Sun family at its peak as an example. Apart from the Dew Immortal Garden that nurtured plant-type fays, they also had the Dew Congealing Medical that had a healing function. Lin Yuan could now perfectly hold up the functions of Sky City's creation master by himself. The first function was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 865. Apart from customizing one bronze epic fay per day according to the fate letter, Sky City also had a deep cooperation with the veteran faction, the Sea of Bliss, the Dew Immortal Garden, and the Indigo Azure Guard. Master Duan Li was still working for him for free, but he would be able to complete the deal with her in a month's time. Master Duan Li would not need to help him concoct platinum potions day and night. As the only Class 4 creation master in the Return from Faraway Manor, apart from researching the underground spaces construction with Hu Quan, Master Hong Shen basically spent the rest of his time enhancing fays for Zhong Xiaobai and the others. Master Hong Shen did not have 3 heads and 6 arms. After enhancing the fays for Zhong Xiaobai and the others, it was enough for him to raise the grade of the Angelfish of Bliss. Therefore, the Return from Faraway Manor's creation function would not have much development in the short term. It was enough to rely on Lin Yuan to produce creation master resources like a perpetual motion machine. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly felt that perhaps Sky City could rely on his creation master means and use the light from Providence as a function to develop a brand new development route. The spirit guard waiting in the room was rather surprised at Lin Yuan's young age when he entered. After Lin Yuan opened the scroll, the spirit guard had been staring at his expression. However, the spirit guard could not help but have some doubts. When he saw the examination question, the youth's brows did not frown. Instead, he relaxed and let out a long sigh of relief. During the culture competition, the breeding room that he was in had been lucky enough to be selected. The challenger who had participated in the culture competition had immediately frowned and had a sullen face after seeing the examination question as though he had lost his virginity. Just as the spirit guard was feeling puzzled, the youth walked in front of him and handed over the sheepskin scroll. "Thank you for your hard work." The spirit guard hurriedly took the sheepskin scroll from the young man's hand. After reading the questions on it, he immediately went to prepare it. At the same time, he was sure that the youth did not have a sullen face because he knew he had no chance at all. The youth's examination question was actually the quality enhancement examination question that tested the creation master's ability the most. After taking the sheepskin scroll, the spirit guard walked to the huge cabinet that filled half the wall in the breeding room. There were close to 1,000 drawers on the huge cabinet that took up half the wall. The spirit guard checked the code on the bottom right corner of the scroll and opened the corresponding drawer. He took out the diamond fey storage box from the drawer and handed it to Lin Yuan before leaving the room. It could be said that his actions were done in one go. From reading the examination questions to preparing the materials, not even half a minute had passed. Lin Yuan placed all the items in the fey storage box on the operating table. Lin Yuan saw 5 purple-eyed lop-eared electric rabbits looking at him curiously. Occasionally, their long ears would overlap and emit bright purple electric arcs. Apart from these 5 healthy lop-eared electric rabbits, there was another lop-eared electric rabbit that was curling its body into a ball. His 2 big ears were lying on the ground, charred black. It was obvious that he had suffered heavy injuries. After checking the severely injured lop-eared electric rabbit's condition, Lin Yuan was certain that it was not far from death. This lop-eared electric rabbit that was on the verge of death was the one that Lin Yuan had to heal in the sheepskin scroll. The lop-eared electric rabbit might be extremely good-looking, cute, and could be kept as a pet. When the weather turned cold during autumn and winter, the lop-eared electric rabbit would be placed on the neck, and its 2 long ears would be the softest scarf. However, unlike the cute appearance of the lop-eared electric rabbit, it was a very violent, power offense type fae. The lop-eared lightning rabbit that was on the brink of death had most likely suffered a backlash from the lightning energy emitted from its overlapping ears when it was releasing its skill. Apart from these 6 lop-eared electric rabbits, the diamond fae storage box was left with a huge pile of various spiritual ingredients. There were many types of spiritual ingredients, but each of them was relatively rare. In order to raise the lop-eared electric rabbit's quality and heal its roots, only a few spiritual ingredients were needed. It was likely that there were so many spiritual ingredients to increase the difficulty of the examination. Lin Yuan chose a silver spiritual ingredient, the ma boiling leaf, which had a relatively high number of spiritual ingredients. The ma boiling leaf was a spiritual ingredient that creation masters and healing-type spirit chi professionals commonly used. It was favored by creation masters and healing-type spirit chi professionals, but it didn't mean that the ma boiling leaf could heal fays. The ma boiling leaf's true effect was to let the fae fall into a deep coma after consuming it, reducing the pain during the healing process. Once Sky City's creation master's function was developed, the ma boiling leaf could be said to be an indispensable spiritual ingredient when Lin Yuan nurtured fays. When Lin Yuan enhanced fays, he would always do it in the spirit lock spatial zone to save time. Without the ma boiling leaf, some fays with high intelligence would have an impression of the spirit lock spatial zone's environment. This wasn't what Lin Yuan wanted. Lin Yuan fed the numbing boiling leaves to the 6 lop-eared electric rabbits, and they quickly fell asleep after consuming the numbing boiling leaves. Upon seeing the situation, Lin Yuan immediately summoned Genius. After Genius was summoned, it stretched out its 5 fluffy tails. Then, she quickly climbed onto Lin Yuan's shoulder and rubbed her cheek against Lin Yuan's shoulder while speaking in a childish voice. Lin Yuan, Chimey is preparing to livestream tomorrow night. Genius just helped Chimey set up a livestream room on StarWeb. Lin Yuan felt a little strange. Why would Genius help to decorate Chimey's livestreaming room? However, Lin Yuan didn't have the time to think about it. Genius, help me pick out the spirit materials that can be used to raise the quality of the 6 lop-eared lightning rabbits and heal their origins. After saying that, Lin Yuan extended his hand and covered the charred ears of the lop-eared electric rabbit that was on the verge of death. Lin Yuan circulated the spiritual power in his body and injected a massive amount of pure spiritual power into the lop-eared electric rabbit's body. In just a moment, the lop-eared electric rabbit's damaged roots recovered with Lin Yuan's hands. Its quality rose from bronze normal to bronze flawless like a rocket. In total, Lin Yuan had only used about 6 minutes. More than half of the time was used to heal the lop-eared electric rabbit's roots. Previously, when he nurtured fays and promoted them to epic, 95% of the time was spent on the transition from flawless to epic. Since it didn't require a lot of spirit chi to promote a fay's quality to flawless, Lin Yuan could do it easily even if he wasn't in the spirit lock spatial zone. In fact, when Lin Yuan saw this question, he knew the true intention of the person who set this question. The second question was even more. End of this chapter. Chapter 867. Li Zhonglin sighed in admiration when he heard this. Regardless of what happens in the martial arena, Little Yuan is first in the culture arena. That means that he has secured the top 2 spots in both the culture and martial arenas. When we go back, help me get your father's last spirit savory pig out. I will cook a few dishes for Little Yuan. When Chef Supreme heard his daughter, Zhong Yingying's words, his face immediately darkened. Chef Supreme had sensed the Moon Empress gaze on him and felt her eyes full of vigor. In fact, even Chef Supreme himself was very amazed that Lin Yuan had been able to complete the civil and martial duel challenges within 20 minutes. It would be fine if Cold Moon and Black Moon, who were standing behind the Moon Empress, praised their young lord, but why was his daughter praising the Moon Empress disciple? She even said that he was much stronger than Zhong Ziyi. Wasn't this the same as admitting that Zhong Ziyi's creation master strength was inferior to Lin Yuan's? Furthermore, how was bringing Zhong Ziyi to improve his creation master strength considered entering the kitchen? Using cooking to perfectly fuse the components of spiritual ingredients was the path of a creation master that he pursued. Any path that perfectly fused the components of spiritual ingredients was a unique expression of life evolution. Among the Class 5 creation masters, only the bamboo monarch walked the path of a normal creation master's spirit fluid concoction. When the Moon Empress concocted her own unique formula, she would also use the moonlight to sublimate the spiritual ingredients into gaseous, material, and liquid states. Then, she would let these substances entangle and turn them into a wisp of fragrance. It was just like the method of concocting incense. Chef Supreme remembered that his daughter was very considerate when she was young. Ever since he accepted Li Zhonglin as a disciple, Li Zhonglin had started to take his precious daughter up trees to dig bird nests and jump into the fish pond to catch fish. She had never done anything good. Just as Chef Supreme was ridiculing Li Zhonglin, he heard Li Zhonglin's words. Li Zhonglin's words made Chef Supreme's already dark face turn as black as the bottom of a pot. Look, Li Zhonglin, this bastard, is giving me a headache every day. He had even allowed his daughter to steal the last spirit-savory pig that he had been raising in the palace. Putting aside the fact that Li Zhonglin instigated his wife to steal from his master and father-in-law, what kind of behavior was that? There's only one spirit-savory pig left in the world because of you, yet you still don't want to let it go. If this spirit-savory pig was harmed as well, the kitchen incense palace's signature spirit item would be completely gone. Why didn't I see Jiu Lang uproot the entire stretch of purple bamboo forest? Why didn't he go and chop the 2 silver stamen gold luster caches outside the Radiant Moon Palace? Although he was complaining, Supreme Chef, who sat on the 13th chair, really couldn't do anything to his eldest disciple. A few days ago, he had said a few words to Li Zhonglin, and his daughter had immediately gone mad. If he said a few more words, wouldn't his daughter run away with Li Zhonglin again? The conversation between the Moon Empress and that calm voice had been heard by the senior factions and the top factions in Yeang Palace. Only then did the senior factions and the top factions in charge of the Night Emperor Palace's inner palace suddenly understand Lin Yuan's identity. However, Lin Yuan's identity as the Moon Empress disciple did not surprise these top factions or veteran factions management generation. Those who should be shocked had already been shocked long ago. What else could be more shocking than a 17 or 18-year-old youth suppressing Chef Supreme's disciple? Being the first to complete the civil and martial challenges was even more shocking. Chef Supreme's young disciple was 23 years old after the new year. In terms of appearance, Lin Yuan and Zhong Ziyi were at least 4 to 5 years apart. Now, it seemed that Lin Yuan's identity as the Moon Empress disciple was more reasonable to explain. Seeing Lin Yuan walk back to his small group, the senior factions and top factions management generation's gazes began to change. Most of the senior factions and top factions management generation's gazes gathered on Long Tu and Li Yun Neo Khan. Seeing that Long Tu and Li Yun Neo Khan did not look surprised, it was clear that they obviously knew Lin Yuan's identity from the beginning. In the Coiled Dragon Valley, Li Yun Neo Khan could form a relationship with the Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yeast disciple, and the other top factions and veteran factions were very envious. As for Gao Pei, the other top factions and veteran factions management generation simply did not want to take another look at him. It could be said that Gao Pei was the biggest winner of this NYX assembly. Gao Pei's son, Gao Feng, was not just in this small group. It seemed that compared to Long Dao, Li Xian and the Moon Empress were more familiar with Chief Guard Yeast disciple. Moreover, Gao Feng had also obtained Lord Cicada Cry's favor and was very likely to be nominated as a disciple by Lord Cicada Cry during the NYX Assembly's main meeting. They did not know what kind of luck Gao Pei had to be able to have such a son. As for Sun Ningxiang in the small group, many of the senior factions and top factions' gazes became somewhat complicated. There had been rumors that the Sun family's internal changes had occurred, and it was very likely that they would fall from the ranks of the top factions within a few years. But now, it seemed that even if the Sun family's Dew Immortal Garden was weak, it was definitely not simple internally. Many of the top factions management generation, who were eyeing the Sun family's Dew Immortal Garden, could not help but ponder in their hearts. At that moment, Chef Supreme's expression became a little better when he saw Zhong Ziyi also walking out of the long corridor. It had been about 23 minutes since the start of the civil and martial duels, and it was considered normal for Zhong Ziyi to come out at this time. After seeing Zhong Ziyi walk out, the bamboo monarch, who had not spoken much since Jiyu Lang had gone to participate in the civil and martial duels, spoke up. In a while, the two young fellows who are going to compete in the civil and martial duels are already here. After speaking, the bamboo monarch looked at the Moon Empress. The bamboo monarch had seen Zhong Ziyi's strength before, and he had always been on par with his little disciple, Jiyu Lang. The civil and martial duels would be able to see the depth of the Moon Empress disciple's combat ability. When Jiao Feng saw Lin Yuan walking over, he immediately pounced on him and gave him a bear hug. When Jiao Feng used his hand to pat someone's shoulder, it gave people the feeling that someone had smashed a brick on their body. This bear hug made Lin Yuan feel as though a tank had collided with him. Upon seeing Lin Yuan's face turn red from Jiao Feng's collision, Liu Jie hurriedly went forward to pull them apart. Long Dao, Li Xian, and Sun Ningxiang also came forward. Jiao Feng chuckled. "Brother, congratulations. You finished both the civil and martial arenas very quickly." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan also revealed a smile. However, Lin Yuan was not happy that he had obtained first place in the civil and martial duels. First place was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 868. Lin Yuan clearly knew that he had obtained first place in both the civil and martial duels due to luck. If it had been another question, he might have become the last one. From the bottom of his heart, Lin Yuan felt that it was hard not to feel happy from such sincere congratulations between friends without any impurities. After Long Dao congratulated Lin Yuan, he saw Zhong Ziyi returning to the outer palace through the long corridor. Long Dao frowned and turned to ask Lin Yuan, "Lin Yuan, how much do you know about Zhong Ziyi's strength?" Lin Yuan frowned and turned to ask, "Lin Yuan, how much do you know about Zhong Ziyi's strength?" Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan shook his head gently. He did not know anything about Zhong Ziyi's strength. However, Lin Yuan did not feel that there was anything to worry about. During the duel with Zhong Ziyi, he could use Morbius True Data to examine Zhong Ziyi's fei. In an instant, he would have a comprehensive understanding of Zhong Ziyi's contracted fei. Zhong Ziyi might also be a creation master and could also inspect his fei. However, Lin Yuan didn't have any intention of summoning his contracted fei in the civil and martial dueling ring. Therefore, Zhong Ziyi's creation master ability would not be of any use in the martial duel. Since it was the civil and martial duel, he only needed to have a duel against Chef Supreme's disciple, Zhong Ziyi. Lin Yuan felt that his sacred source lifeform, Sacred Sword Embracing Queen, was destined to be used. Upon seeing that Lin Yuan did not know Zhong Ziyi's strength, Long Dao recalled the duel between him and Zhong Ziyi in the Radiant Sacred Hall. He said with a grave expression, "Zhong Ziyi's contracted feis are mainly fire-type feis and have extremely strong explosive power. During the duel, you have to pay special attention to Zhong Ziyi's sudden explosive power." At this point, Long Dao didn't continue speaking. Firstly, this was a secret duel in the Radiant Sacred Hall. Secondly, it had been a long time since Long Dao and Zhong Ziyi's duel. During this period of time, Zhong Ziyi's strength should have improved greatly again. Long Dao was afraid that if he revealed Zhong Ziyi's strength during the duel, it might cause Lin Yuan to misjudge Zhong Ziyi's strength. If that was the case, Long Dao would have committed a great sin. Therefore, Long Dao only gave a general description of Zhong Ziyi's phase attributes and reminded Lin Yuan to be careful of Zhong Ziyi's instant explosive power. At that time, the blazing fire had almost cast a shadow on Long Dao. When Lin Yuan heard Long Dao's words, his eyes lit up. If Zhong Ziyi mainly contracted a fire attribute fei, it would simply be great news for him. Due to the Princess Robe's engraved laws, his resistance to darkness type was the strongest. Next was the resistance to the fire attribute. The Cold Flame Law, which Lin Yuan had specially upgraded to Myth 3, contained the changes of the ice and fire attributes. Moreover, the Gilded Flame Dragon Lice's skirt was also engraved with the Burning Flame Law that the Gilded Flame Dragon Lice had comprehended. The Flame Dragon Lice's law crystal fragments had been provided by Duan He when he joined Sky City. Although the law crystal of the mythical breed Gilded Flame Dragon Lice wasn't complete, the small pile of law crystal fragments could still be pieced together into a complete law crystal. This unlucky flame dragon lice must have been killed by the lightning-horned sky-rumbling snail and the six-headed sea demon snake. Otherwise, the law crystal fragments wouldn't be so complete. It could be said that Lin Yuan had the first advantage in the duel with Zhong Ziyi. If Zhong Ziyi's contracted fey was not engraved on the princess robe, even if Lin Yuan had integrated all the Radiance Federation's recorded combat skills and movement techniques, he would still have to be cautious when using the spirit herbs to fight. In that kind of intensive attack, it was not realistic to use the ethereal jellyfish diamond ability, spatial transfer, to transfer the space filled with elemental energy to the dimension. It was more cost-effective for the ethereal jellyfish diamond ability, spatial transfer, to transfer large-scale elemental damage instantaneously. Otherwise, the spiritual power consumed by the ethereal jellyfish diamond ability, spatial transfer, was not something that Lin Yuan could easily afford. After understanding Zhong Ziyi's phase attributes, Lin Yuan had some confidence in his heart. Big brother Long, I'll be careful. Long Dao looked into Lin Yuan's eyes and found that he didn't panic about the upcoming duel. Instead, there was a sense of confidence in his eyes. Long Dao knew that Lin Yuan's strength was definitely much stronger than he had imagined. Long Dao couldn't help but be full of anticipation for the duel between Zhong Ziyi and Lin Yuan. Zhong Ziyi walked to Jiyu Lang's side and glanced in Lin Yuan's direction from time to time. Jiyu Lang asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you shocked?" "Are you?" At this point, Jiyu Lang immediately stopped. Jiyu Lang realized that Zhong Ziyi's eyes didn't show any disappointment because of the shock. Instead, he was abnormally excited. At the same time, there was a trace of imperceptible passion in his eyes. "Big brother Jiyu Lang, I realized today that I met someone who can suppress my desire to fight." Upon hearing Zhong Ziyi's words, Jiyu Lang was confused. Jiyu Lang's curse that had turned into misfortune could be said to be the Kitchen Fragrance Palace's secret. After Chef Supreme realized that he couldn't resolve Zhong Ziyi's misfortune, he didn't look for the Bamboo Monarch and the Moon Empress for help. Thus, Jiyu Lang naturally couldn't know the true reason why Zhong Ziyi was abnormally fanatical about fighting. Just as Jiyu Lang was feeling puzzled, Zhong Ziyi pulled him and said, "Let's go, big brother Jiyu Lang. Brother Jiyu Lang, let's go over there and say hello to them." Without giving Jiyu Lang any time to react, Jiyu Lang was pulled by Zhong Ziyi toward Lin Yuan's direction. Jiyu Lang came back to his senses and didn't struggle free from Zhong Ziyi's hand. In Jiyu Lang's opinion, it was normal to greet them over there. The Moon Empress and Chief Guard Yi's disciple naturally had to get to know each other, and they would have to interact in the future. However, Jiyu Lang didn't understand why Zhong Ziyi, who was a relatively indifferent person, would take the initiative to greet others. Could it be because of the civil and martial duels, Zhong Ziyi and the Moon Empress disciple appreciated each other's talents? Zhong Ziyi pulled Jiyu Lang over to Lin Yuan's side and saw Jiao Feng standing beside Lin Yuan with his hand on Lin Yuan's shoulder. At that moment, Zhong Ziyi noticed that the 6 people in Lin Yuan's small circle had noticed him, so he immediately introduced himself. "I am Zhong Ziyi." After speaking, Zhong Ziyi took a step forward without a trace and inserted himself between Jiao Feng and Lin Yuan. Upon seeing this, Jiao Feng hurriedly moved to the side and subconsciously thought that Zhong Ziyi and Lin Yuan knew each other before. Zhong Ziyi, who was standing beside Lin Yuan with satisfaction, started to quickly sniff. However, after this sniff, Zhong Ziyi realized that he couldn't smell that fragrance that could suppress his misfortune anymore. The second one was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 869. Thus, Zhong Ziyi subconsciously turned his head and took a step closer to Lin Yuan. Since Zhong Ziyi was taller than Lin Yuan, Zhong Ziyi's action of sniffing at the top of his head made Lin Yuan think that his hair had a strange smell. When Lin Yuan's body was weak in the Xia region, no matter how busy he would still take a bath every day. Now that his body was strong and his conditions were better, he did not miss a single day. Moreover, he had already used the silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar to wash away the impurities on his body. Even if he did not wash his hair for a lifetime, there would not be any unpleasant smell. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly thought of what Zhong Ziyi had said to him. "You smell so good." Lin Yuan finally realized that Zhong Ziyi was talking about the smell of the astrology wisdom epiphyllum's pollen. This made Lin Yuan look at Zhong Ziyi with an increasingly strange gaze. There was something strange about astrologer Ji Tan's pollen, and that was that those who weren't infected with misfortune were almost unable to detect its fragrance. Only those with bad luck could smell the fragrance of astrologer Ji Tan's pollen. The heavier the misfortune on one's body, the greater the attraction of the astrology wisdom epiphyllum's pollen. It was just like when Lin Yuan had eaten the pollen, he had not smelled any fragrance at all. It was as though he was swallowing some spicy scraps in his throat. Lin Yuan thought to himself, could it be that Zhong Ziyi is also tainted with misfortune? Thus, Lin Yuan took out a small piece of pollen that had fallen on the breeding table beside the astrology wisdom epiphyllum and gently crushed it into powder with his fingertips. Lin Yuan immediately noticed an excited look on Zhong Ziyi's face, and the speed at which he sniffed his nose became faster. He was just like a small wolf dog. After verification, Lin Yuan also confirmed his guess in his heart. It seemed that Zhong Ziyi was indeed infected with misfortune. Given Zhong Ziyi's sensitivity to the astrology wisdom epiphyllum's pollen, the misfortune on Zhong Ziyi was already very serious. Zhong Ziyi was a cold person who was not good at talking. After joining Lin Yuan's small group, he had not spoken much. On the other side, Jiyu Lang was a gentle and talkative person. Jiyu Lang deliberately befriended him. In just a short while, Lin Yuan, Liu Jie, Long Dao, Li Xian, Jiao Feng, and Sun Ningxiang got into a fight. This made the younger generation of the surrounding top and veteran forces look at this small group with even more envy. In Indigo Azure City, everyone had to address Zheng Kaiyuan as second young master. However, ever since Miao Zhuo had been thrown out, Zheng Kaiyuan seemed to have lost his backbone and was overcautious in everything he did. Zheng Kaiyuan originally wanted to participate in the martial arena competition, but because he was constantly panicking, he didn't dare to participate in the end. Before Zheng Kaiyuan came to the NYX assembly, his master, Miao Qi, had instructed him to stay by Miao Zhuo's side. Now that something so serious had happened to Miao Zhuo, even if his master, Miao Qi, doted on him, he was destined to be implicated by Miao Zhuo. In fact, the Miao clan might even abandon their support and assistance to the Zheng clan in a fit of rage. At the thought of his upcoming situation, Zheng Kaiyuan mustered up all his courage and walked toward Lin Yuan's small group. On one hand, Zheng Kaiyuan wanted to help Miao Zhuo and see if he could get the forgiveness of Chief Guard Yi's disciple and that youth. On the other hand, Zheng Kaiyuan felt that he was very good at making friends. He wanted to see if he could be lucky enough to get along with Chief Guard Yi, Chef Supreme, and Bamboo Monarch's disciple and integrate into this small group. When Zheng Kaiyuan walked, he felt that his legs were trembling because the status of these people he was walking toward was not something he could compare to. Even Miao Zhuo, whom he had always had to look up to, could not compare to these people's statuses. Otherwise, Miao Zhuo would not have been thrown out with his soul injured because he had casually pointed at him. Seeing Zheng Kaiyuan walking in his direction, Zhong Ziyi, who was quickly sniffing beside Lin Yuan, immediately frowned. Zhong Ziyi, who had always been indifferent, had always disliked people approaching him in such situations. Therefore, as Zheng Kaiyuan approached, Zhong Ziyi's expression became colder and colder. Normally, Zhong Ziyi would have flared up and asked Zheng Kaiyuan to get lost. However, Zhong Ziyi had not experienced the conflict in the Night Palace and did not know the relationship between Zheng Kaiyuan and Lin Yuan. If Zheng Kaiyuan was Lin Yuan's friend, it would not be good for him to rashly flare up, so Zhong Ziyi endured it. When Liu Jie saw Zheng Kaiyuan walk closer, he subconsciously stepped forward to block in front of Lin Yuan. He could not forget the attack that he, Lin Yuan, and the others had suffered outside Indigo Azure City. Jiao Hansong was from the Zheng family's third lineage, so it was reasonable to say that he had no direct relationship with Zheng Kaiyuan. However, Nightmare 6 had been sent by Zheng Kaiyuan, so there was a death feud between them. If this was not the Night Palace's outer palace, even if he was the Night Palace's young palatial lord, he would not have killed Zheng Kaiyuan in front of so many veteran factions and the younger generation of the top factions. At this moment, Zheng Kaiyuan was already a dead man. Zheng Kaiyuan was about to greet him carefully but did not expect Chief Guard Yi's disciple to be so hostile toward him. Could it be because of the conflict just now? Miao Zhuo had been the one acting tough in that conflict, and he had only stood by Miao Zhuo's side. Apart from that, he had not done anything in that conflict. When Lin Yuan saw Zheng Kaiyuan walking over with a faint timid expression, he vaguely understood Zheng Kaiyuan's intention. Lin Yuan immediately revealed a meaningful smile. Lin Yuan waved at Zheng Kaiyuan and said, "All right. If you have something to say, why don't you come over and say it?" When Zheng Kaiyuan heard Lin Yuan's words, the faintly timid expression on his face immediately turned into pleasant surprise. Liu Jie looked at Lin Yuan with some confusion, not understanding his purpose in doing this. Lin Yuan called Zheng Kaiyuan to his side and gave him his contact information after a few words. He then ignored Zheng Kaiyuan. When he revealed his identity at the NYX assembly, the Miao family would definitely think of ways to find an opportunity to apologize to him and Liu Jie. Lin Yuan didn't reject Zheng Kaiyuan's goodwill. Instead, he asked Zheng Kaiyuan to leave his contact information. It was to mislead the disciples of the other veteran forces and peak forces into thinking that Zheng Kaiyuan had formed a relationship with them. This would also give the Miao family a way to contact them. At that time, he would just sit back and wait for the Miao family to come knocking on his door. There had always been more than one way to attack the enemy. In addition to the hard steel in the front, the poisonous sugar in the back was often more lethal. At that moment, Zhuo Ming and Yu Zhe returned to the outer palace through the long corridor with several challengers from both the civil and martial arenas. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan took a deep breath, knowing that the real battle was about to begin. Third night, asking for monthly votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 870. Following closely behind Zhuo Ming and Yu Zhe was a tall woman. She looked to be 25 or 26 years old. She looked rather mature and had a mature figure. When she walked, she seemed to be thinking about something. The tall woman hurriedly walked 2 steps to Lurk's side and asked softly. Yu Zhe hurriedly walked to Yu Zhe's side and asked softly, "Lady Yu Zhe, how long did the first and second place of the civil and martial duels take?" Upon hearing that, Yu Zhe told the tall woman the time Lin Yuan and Zhong Ziyi took to pass the test. As soon as Zhuo Ming and Yu Zhe's figures appeared in the long corridor, the outer palace of Night Palace had quietened down. The woman was quite far away from Lin Yuan. Even though the outer palace was very quiet and the woman's question was not clear, it still reached Lin Yuan's ears. Lin Yuan could not help but raise his brows. This tall woman looked so mature, but she actually had a baby's voice. Moreover, it was a little too coquettish. Through his perception, Lin Yuan found that this tall woman had a rich vitality fluctuation. He was abnormally familiar with this kind of vitality fluctuation. Whenever Lin Yuan activated the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill, Life Imprint, and consumed the vitality energy in it, his body would be the conductor of the huge vitality. Even after the vitality energy in the Life Imprint was exhausted, his body would still carry a special vitality fluctuation for a period of time. It could be assumed that this tall woman had used some sort of trump card when she was completing the civil and martial duel challenges. The tall woman took less than 40 minutes to complete the civil and martial duels. If Lin Yuan's record was correct, it should be 39 minutes and 27 seconds. The tall woman's speed of completing the test was nearly 3 minutes faster than Long Dao's. It could be seen that this tall woman's creation master ability was strong. The green spirit chi clothing that the tall woman was wearing had the simplified imprints of hundreds of purebred healing type fays. These simplified imprints were spread on this green spirit chi clothing in a disorderly manner, but it gave this green spirit chi clothing a flourishing beauty. According to the faction symbol on the woman's neck, Lin Yuan knew that this tall woman was from a top faction, the Rhine Lifeform. The Rhine Lifeform had absolute authority and nobility among the Radiance Federation's top factions. Every 3 years, as the top factions declined or rose, the top factions would be rearranged. Rhine, on the other hand, had been in the top 3 of the top forces for nearly 100 years and had never changed his position. Even if there were any changes, it would be between the first and the third. The Rhine Guild Club, which was under the banner of Rhine Living Guild, had become the champion of the Guild Alliance's S tournament last year. When Long Dao saw that Lin Yuan had been looking at this tall woman from the Rhine Lifeform, he said, "That's right. This woman's name is Sheng Yin. She's the person with the most potential among the Rhine lifeforms' younger generation. She's also one of the younger generation that the Rhine lifeforms fully support. This woman might not be in the Radiance 100 sequence, but she has always been active among the younger generation. As the leader of the competition in the Rhine Club, he never goes on stage, but is always making battle plans for the Rhine Club Guild. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan immediately thought of Shushu and Shushu. As the Radiance 100 Sequence 8, Shushu was also a member of the Rhine Guild Club's main force. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard Long Dao's rather fearful voice. Given Sheng Yin's age and strength, she can be in the Radiance 100 sequence. However, she has never participated in the Radiance 100 sequence selection. Otherwise, White Devil Daisy wouldn't be known as the strongest healing-type spirit chi professional in the Radiance 100 sequence. It is rumored that Sheng Yin has a Radiant Light medal. Based on the functionality and limitations of healing-type spirit chi professionals, even if Sheng Yin has no fate as a Radiant Light envoy, it is still possible for her to enter the Radiant Light Knights and become one of the 10 members. Lin Yuan could keenly sense that Long Dao had already regarded this woman named Sheng Yin as his competitor, so he secretly remembered her name. After leaving Zhuo Ming and Yu Zhe's side, most of the younger female members of the veteran and peak forces gathered around Sheng Yin. Sheng Yin squinted her eyes and smiled sweetly, greeting the girls around her. Obviously, he was very popular. Sheng Yin won the 3rd place in the civil and military arena. According to the rules of the civil and military arena, Sheng Yin won the 3rd place. At this moment, Sheng Yin didn't need to participate in the civil and martial duels. She had already secured 3rd place in the civil and martial duels. She could obtain 90 drops of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar that could wash away impurities on the body and 10 drops of silver stamen gold luster cassia nectar that could wash away soul impurities. It could be said that the entire Yeong Palace, be it the inner palace or the outer palace, had their eyes on Lin Yuan and Zhong Ziyi. Lin Yuan felt his blood boil for a long time. In the past few months, Lin Yuan had been constantly improving his strength and increasing his trump cards for this battle. Unlike Lin Yuan's boiling blood, Zhong Ziyi, who had never been able to control himself in battles, sniffed the fragrance and felt a rare calmness in his heart. For some reason, Zhong Ziyi was very reluctant to leave this smell, or perhaps he liked the feeling of standing next to this young man in front of him. In a while, the civil and military arena's final duel would be between him and Lin Yuan, and he probably would not be able to smell this fragrance on the stage. At that time, his old problem would act up again, and his mind would be controlled by the enthusiasm of battle and drown in the thrill of battle. When Zhong Ziyi had completed the civil and military arenas section of the civil and military arenas section, he had thought that he would be the first in the civil and military arena without any suspense. After coming out, he found out that the 1st place in the civil and military arena had already been taken by someone else. Thus, Zhong Ziyi focused his attention elsewhere and wanted to know who was the 1st place in the civil and military arena. In the end, he did not expect the 1st place in the civil and military arenas section to be the young man whose aura could suppress his misfortune. Somehow, Zhong Ziyi felt that there was a special kind of fate between him and Lin Yuan. However, Zhong Ziyi was also a very competitive person. Since he had lost the civil and military arenas section, he had to win it back in the martial arenas section. At that moment, Zhuo Ming walked to the place where the martial arenas section had been held and announced loudly, "The civil and military arenas section of the civil and military arenas section has officially ended. Now, let us invite Lord Lin Yuan and Lord Zhong Ziyi onto the stage to complete the civil and military arenas section." Zhuo Ming's words caused the pupils of the veteran factions and the top faction's younger generation to shrink. Everyone sharply noticed that Zhuo Ming had used the word Lord when addressing Lin Yuan. 1st place. End of this chapter. Chapter 871. Moreover, Lin Yuan's name was before Zhong Ziyi's, which meant that Zhuo Ming subconsciously thought that Lin Yuan's status was higher than Zhong Ziyi's. Everyone could not help but guess Lin Yuan's identity again. Many of the top faction's younger generation thought that before coming to the Great Night Assembly, the mysterious disciple that the Moon Empress had accepted might also appear at the Great Night Assembly. It seemed that Lin Yuan was the Moon Empress disciple. The veteran faction's younger generation could not all guess Lin Yuan's identity, but almost all of the top faction's younger generation had heard the news in advance. Even if the news was blocked, the top faction's younger generation still heard that the blood moon in the sky a few months ago was related to the Moon Empress' mysterious disciple. At that moment, Zhong Ziyi subconsciously walked in Zhuo Ming's direction, but then he thought of something and stopped. He turned his body slightly. Although Zhong Ziyi did not say anything to invite Lin Yuan, his actions were obviously waiting for Lin Yuan to leave together. Since Zhong Ziyi had just joined the small circle, even Long Dao, Li Xian, Jiao Feng, and Sun Ningxiang, who were more familiar with Lin Yuan, still sincerely cheered him on. Liu Jie stood by Lin Yuan's side and did not move at all. He only cheered Lin Yuan on. Jiu Lang raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw Liu Jie's actions. Under normal circumstances, cheering on two people at the same time was undoubtedly the wisest choice. However, Liu Jie only cheered for Lin Yuan, which proved that he had a strong preference for Lin Yuan. This was a sign that their relationship was extremely good. Jiu Lang had just met Lin Yuan, so he naturally had a better relationship with Zhong Ziyi. However, Jiu Lang still said to Zhong Ziyi and Lin Yuan separately, "Zhong Ziyi, Lin Yuan, you two have to do your best later. If Lin Yuan wins and Zhong Ziyi's skills are inferior, why don't you let Zhong Ziyi cook personally and treat the three of us to a big meal at the Kitchen Fragrance Palace?" Zhong Ziyi stared at Jiu Lang for a long time, feeling that Jiu Lang was taking advantage of him. However, Zhong Ziyi was very willing to treat Lin Yuan to a meal. Thinking about how he had tricked Jiu Lang and made Jiu Lang only compete in the civil arena, Zhong Ziyi could only nod and agree. Long Dao, Jiao Feng, Li Xian, and Sun Ningxiang could tell that Jiu Lang had assigned the four of them. Long Dao, Li Xian, Jiao Feng, and Sun Ningxiang didn't have any objections. With their status, they were not qualified to enter a place like the Kitchen Incense Palace. Seeing Zhong Ziyi nod his head, Jiu Lang added, "If Zhong Ziyi wins and Lin Yuan's skills are inferior, then Zhong Ziyi will have to fulfill his promise at the Night Message Pavilion and set up 300 plates in the Kitchen Fragrance Palace. When the time comes, I'll treat the two of you to a meal cooked by Zhong Ziyi. Don't think that Zhong Ziyi usually doesn't like to talk, but when it comes to cooking, no one can compare." Liu Jie couldn't help but show a defiant expression behind his mask. "I, Liu Jie, have never been afraid of anyone when it comes to cooking." When Lin Yuan ate the food he cooked, he was full of praises. Liu Jie felt that he should compete with Zhong Ziyi in cooking if he had the chance. Due to the special nature of his sacred source lifeform, he could not use it against Zhong Ziyi. Since Zhong Ziyi had a sacred source lifeform in the lead, Liu Jie shouldn't be able to win against him. However, when it came to cooking, even if Zhong Ziyi was Chef Supreme's disciple, he might not be able to compare to Liu Jie. Liu Jie was the man who had captured the appetite of the entire return from faraway manor. Before Zheng Kaiyuan had come to the NYX conference, he had wanted to attract everyone's attention. However, now that he was in this small circle and was the center of attention, Zheng Kaiyuan felt an indescribable pressure. The more one cared about their status, the more they would understand the weight of their status. The gazes of the top faction's younger generation all weighed down on Zheng Kaiyuan, causing sweat to appear on Zheng Kaiyuan's back. However, Zheng Kaiyuan raised his head high and tried his best to pretend that he was a member of this small circle. Seeing that everyone was cheering for Lin Yuan and Zhong Ziyi, Zheng Kaiyuan quickly and carefully joined in. However, when he saw Zhong Ziyi's stern expression, Zheng Kaiyuan immediately wanted to retreat. Thinking that Lin Yuan had called him over, Zheng Kaiyuan mustered his courage and walked to Lin Yuan's side. Zheng Kaiyuan, who had always been eloquent, could not help but stutter. "Lord Lin Yuan, good luck." Lin Yuan looked at Zheng Kaiyuan with a meaningful gaze. When Zheng Kaiyuan met Lin Yuan's gaze, he felt a chill run down his spine, and he panicked. At this moment, Zheng Kaiyuan heard the clear and pleasant voice of the young man. "You have to work hard too. Work hard and complete the mission of a communication link." People were destined to be frivolous after gaining power. Frivolousness toward people of lower status would bring envy. Frivolousness toward people of equal status would bring envy. Frivolousness toward people of higher status would only bring disgust. If the Miao family's family head personally begged Zheng Kaiyuan, how arrogant would Zheng Kaiyuan be in the Miao family and the Zheng family? Lin Yuan had just called Zheng Kaiyuan into his small circle and observed Zheng Kaiyuan's performance. Lin Yuan knew that Zheng Kaiyuan was not a humble person. Lin Yuan was not afraid that Zheng Kaiyuan would be arrogant in the Miao family and the Zheng family, but he was afraid that Zheng Kaiyuan would not be arrogant enough. In the future, Lin Yuan would not need to personally deal with Zheng Kaiyuan. When a platform was built from flat ground, it would collapse without any push. The higher the platform was, the harder the person standing on the platform would fall when it collapsed. What kind of torture would be waiting for Zheng Kaiyuan from the Miao family and the Zheng family? When hatred accumulated to the extreme, it would turn into a malicious spirit. Lin Yuan could treat his friends like spring all year round, but when facing enemies that wanted to take his life, he felt that it was not enough to turn into a cold winter. Lin Yuan and Zhong Ziyi entered the martial arena under everyone's eyes. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and slightly gathered strength in his feet. He leaned forward and entered a fully focused offensive state. Zhong Ziyi left Lin Yuan's side and stood on the stage. That battle frenzy could no longer be suppressed. Following Zhuo Ming's command, Zhong Ziyi immediately summoned the two fays. One of the palm-sized orange rats did not join the battle after it was summoned. After it was summoned, it did not join the battle. Instead, it scuttled onto Zhong Ziyi's shoulder and squeaked. The other was a giant magma ball that was constantly changing its shape. In just a short period of time, the giant magma ball had changed back and forth into 7 or 8 different beasts. Every time it transformed, the giant magma ball would emit the unique wild aura of the beast. The second one was even more. End of this chapter. Chapter 872. Lin Yuan subconsciously used true data to look at the palm-sized orange rat and the huge magma ball that could constantly transform into various beast forms. Fey name, sky-burning centipede, Fey species, fur-toothed beast, Fey grade, diamond, 10/10, Fey type, fire, Fey quality, fantasy V abilities sad smiley fire devour. Increase one's fire element capacity by devouring strange flames and allow the fire element in the body to transform according to the characteristics of the devoured strange flames. Scorching gaze, gather pure fire element energy in the eyes to stare at the target. The target being stared at will enter a burning state. Fire tempering, extract the energy in the strange flames and use various types of strange flames to temper one of the strange flames, inducing the strange flames to evolve. During the tempering process, one's physique can be enhanced at the same time. Flame revival, instantly condense all the fire element energy into flames with the burning characteristics. The flames in the burning state have the effect of burning vitality. Group flame heart flame, sacrifice 100 types of flames with different characteristics and condense a bunch of flames that can burn the spirit and spiritual energy. It will burn the target's spirit and spiritual energy. When the target's spirit and spiritual energy are exhausted, a flame will ignite from the depths of the target's heart and spiritual energy, burning the body from the inside out. Flame energy transmission, transmit one's own flame energy to other fire element phase and cause them to enter a berserk state. Exclusive skill sad smiley exceptional flame 8 refinements, refine 8 types of flames in the body into source flames. When attacking the target, spit out 8 types of exceptional flames. The 8 types of exceptional flames will stack up continuously for 8 times of gradually increasing damage. Fire Fantasyland, activate all the fire characteristics in the body. Each fire characteristic will turn into a brick and use the bricks and tiles to form a domain formed by the fire characteristics. Within the domain, the fire damage will be multiplied. Fey name, Reincarnation Flame Beast, Source Fire, Fey species, Elemental class, Fey grade, Diamond, 10/10, Fey type, Fire source, Fey quality, Fantasy I abilities sad smiley metal refining, devour metal and use flames to burn the metal, forming a viscous magma-like body. Beast type attachment, by devouring the bloodline power of a specific beast, increase the lava body's transformation ability. The transformed lava body will launch a special flame attack based on the Fey's bloodline advantage. Beast bloodline fusion, can fuse multiple beast bloodlines within one's body, forming a flame beast that combines various beast bloodlines and innate abilities. Flame of reincarnation. When the reincarnation flame beast is fatally injured, as long as there is a continuous supply of fire elemental energy, the reincarnation flame beast will be reborn within the fire elemental energy. Boiling flame body relies on swallowing metal to form a magma body that quickly spits out fire-type energy. While dealing burn damage to the target, the molten metal will condense into a weapon to attack the target. Reincarnation point. The reincarnation flame beast will offer half of its fire elemental energy as a sacrifice. After the sacrifice, it will automatically activate its second exclusive skill, Lava Demon God. Exclusive skill Sad Smiley Flame Division. When receiving a fatal attack, the reincarnation flame beast will automatically split its body to offset the damage. At the same time, it will rely on the beast-type phase bloodline to split into a new body. The number of splits depends on the number of beast-type bloodlines in the body. Lava Demon God uses pure fire elemental energy to promote the fusion of the beast-type phase bloodline in the reincarnation flame beast's body and uses the pure fire elemental energy to induce multiple distortions and evolutions, forming a monster with a lava body. After the Lava Demon God appears, it will attack all targets on the field indiscriminately. Just as Lin Yuan finished looking at the two-phase exclusive skills, the huge lava ball had already turned into a 4-meter-long, 2-meter-tall majestic tiger. It roared and pounced at him. The lava giant tiger's roar contained blazing fire elemental energy, which caused the air in the arena to become abnormally scorched. If Zhuo Ming hadn't put up a barrier, the younger generation of the top factions and veteran factions wouldn't have been able to enjoy the show in peace. At that moment, they were already unable to bear the blazing fire elemental energy. At that moment, the younger generation, including Liu Jie, couldn't help but exclaim. Zhong Ziyi had already started his attack, but Lin Yuan had yet to summon his contracted Fei. Just as the blazing fire elemental energy was about to engulf Lin Yuan, even louder exclamations echoed. Even the younger generation of the veteran factions and the top factions, who had received good education since young, couldn't help but curse. F***CK, Lord Zhuo Ming has already said that the match has begun, and Lord Zhong Ziyi has also summoned his Fei to attack. Why isn't Lin Yuan summoning his Fei? Damn. With such pure fire elemental energy burning, I'm afraid even a piece of platinum spiritual ingredient will be melted into soup. Could it be that an accident is going to happen during the duel? Will Lin Yuan turn into coke? Sun Ningxiang and Jiao Feng didn't expect Zhong Ziyi's attack to be so fierce. They were a little flustered and couldn't calm down to analyze the situation on the stage. Upon seeing Lin Yuan being engulfed by the flames, Liu Jie subconsciously wanted to rush toward the arena. At that moment, Liu Jie felt a pair of hands land on his shoulders, and Ji Yulang's gentle voice echoed in his ears. Concern leads to confusion. As the young palatial lord of Night End Palace, do you still doubt Zhuo Ming's control of the battlefield? If something really happens to Lin Yuan, I think Zhuo Ming will be the most anxious one. Liu Jie still clenched his fists and gritted his teeth as he looked in the direction of the arena. Just like Liu Jie's concern, the Moon Empress was also shocked when she saw the fire engulfing Lin Yuan. However, she immediately calmed down because she saw Lin Yuan, who was in the blazing flames, swinging his fist and using his physical body to smash at the tiger-shaped Fei that had transformed into the reincarnation flame beast. It could be said that Lin Yuan wasn't the slightest bit affected by the blazing flames. It was just like how the raging flames carried by the tiger-shaped Fei's roar had no temperature. Under Lin Yuan's punch, the huge tiger-shaped Fei's body was ejected like a cannonball and ruthlessly smashed into the Night End Palace's outer palace's floor, which was made of suzerain dark crystal. Lin Yuan flipped over and stood cleanly on the ground. He looked at Zhong Ziyi, who was immersed in the battle, and smiled. If you want to cause damage to me, the intensity of such flames is still far from enough. After writing the data of the two Feis for 3.5 hours, they had lost 100 strands of hair. On account of Button's hard work, please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 873. If the younger generation of the veteran factions and pinnacle factions had been worried about Lin Yuan's situation, then they were extremely surprised now. Heavens! Lin Yuan can't be a humanoid Fei, right? How did he send such a huge giant lava tiger flying with a single punch without getting burned? Even if the left guard official can't feel the actual temperature of the blazing flames with a shield, the reincarnation flame beast is a Diamond X Fantasy 3 source-type lifeform. The key is that this elemental source-type lifeform evolved from the source fire and was nurtured by Lord Zhongzi. A series of exclamations echoed in the Night Dawn Palace's outer palace. The area with the most exclamations came from the Pinnacle faction's Rhine lifeform, Sheng Yin, who was in the circle of the younger generation of the Pinnacle factions and veteran factions. None of the younger generation members brought by their families to participate in the NYX assembly were not geniuses. All of them had suppressed their male peers in the faction they belonged to, and their families had poured a lot of blood and sweat into them. Even if these geniuses were usually pursued by men, they could not help but show their girlish feelings when facing men who were more outstanding. It could be said that the most eye-catching people in the Night Dawn Palace's outer palace were on the martial and civil arenas. Regardless of rank and status, it could be said that the top two in the civil and martial arenas were more valuable than the first in the civil and martial arenas. Lin Yuan and Zhong Zi's looks were also top-notch, and they each had their own merits. Zhong Zi was wearing red half-body armor, and his stern face was filled with battle fanaticism and wildness. Lin Yuan was usually calm, and the beauty contained in his sunny smile could definitely dazzle people's eyes. Coupled with the fresh natural aura on his body, these 24 or 25-year-old geniuses could not help but want to rub Lin Yuan's head. Big sister Sheng Yin, I didn't expect Lord Zhong Zi to suffer a small loss at the beginning. Sheng Yin immediately denied it. A casual test at the beginning of this duel can't prove anything. Zhong Zi's strength is not just this. Although her voice sounded coy, her tone was very serious. Sheng Yin then recalled that 2 years ago, when she was a healing-type spirit chi professional, she had been invited by Jiyu Lang to help with a mission in a Class 3 swamp dimensional rift. Before participating in the mission, Sheng Yin knew that the purpose of the mission was to capture a snake Medusa. For a dimensional creature like Medusa, no matter how much its grade increased, it was still a half-human dimensional creature. Spirit chi professionals couldn't contract ordinary dimensional lifeforms, but some dimensional lifeforms that had undergone special mutations could be contracted by spirit chi professionals. The snake Medusa was a dimensional lifeform that could be contracted by spirit chi professionals. When the swamp dimensional lifeform, Medusa, had evolved into a snake due to an unknown mutation. It looked roughly the same as an ordinary snake species Fae. However, the snake Medusa had inherited all of Medusa's abilities. It was both powerful and rare. At that time, Jiyu Lang had placed great importance on this snake Medusa, but who would have thought that this snake Medusa's bloodline was abnormally powerful? Before transforming into a snake, it was already at the pinnacle of Class 3, and the ceiling of the swamp dimensional rift had faintly reached the standard of a suzerain. After transforming into a snake, the Medusa was no longer a dimensional lifeform. Hence, the Medusa's strength exceeded the pinnacle Class 3 swamp dimensional rift standard. It still wouldn't be repelled by the dimensional rift or cause the dimensional rift to evolve. This was 2 years ago, and at that time, the snake Medusa's suzerain strength wasn't something that she could contend with. At that time, Sheng Yin seemed to have seen a firework that could topple the world. Thousands of flames condensed in the air, and a bright red flash flashed. The suzerain snake Medusa was directly burned into a half-charred state. Finally, Jiyu Lang stored it in a Fey storage box. That was the first time Sheng Yin had been shocked by the strength of a peer. From then on, Zhong Zi could be said to have become Sheng Yin's idol. However, even with Sheng Yin's vision, she couldn't understand how he had such a strong flame resistance. Even if Zhong Zi hadn't exerted his strength, just the temperature emitted by the Diamond X Fantasy 3 reincarnation flame beast's flames was not easy to deal with. This flame could cause absolute instant death damage to Fays below Diamond Fantasy breed. Even if Fays of the same grade as the reincarnation flame beast were roasted by this flame, it was impossible for them to be unscathed. As a creation master, Sheng Yin could be sure that Lin Yuan was not a Fey and did not have a Fey bloodline. This was because Lin Yuan didn't have that kind of Fey's aura at all, nor did he have a beast pattern. It could be said that Lin Yuan was a pure human spirit chi professional, which proved that the strength he was displaying now was all provided by his contracted Fey. It should be one of Lin Yuan's fays that bestowed him with fire resistance and that shocking strength. Sheng Yin couldn't see too much at once from the collision just now. At that moment, Sheng Yin heard her little sister's voice again. Big sister Sheng Yin, I announce that Lin Yuan will be my darling from now on. Lin Yuan's action of turning over in the air and landing on the ground just now was too cool. Upon hearing that, Sheng Yin's pupils shrank, and she finally realized what was wrong. Lin Yuan's strong flame resistance and monstrous strength could be said to be provided by fays. However, Lin Yuan's combat skills and movement techniques were definitely his own. Could it be that this young Lin Yuan was also a martial arts prodigy? In the era of the Spirit Qi awakening, it was a very stupid thing to spend time honing combat skills and movement techniques. The veteran factions and the top faction's younger generation outside the arena exclaimed one after another, but it didn't affect Lin Yuan and Zhong Ziyi, who were standing on the arena at that moment. Although Zhong Ziyi would be affected by misfortune during combat and become a battle maniac, it didn't mean that he was irrational. On the contrary, Zhong Ziyi's spirit would be highly concentrated during combat, and his mind would become more flexible. When Zhong Ziyi launched an attack on Lin Yuan, he knew that Lin Yuan would definitely be able to withstand it. However, he didn't expect Lin Yuan to withstand it in this way and even counterattack. Zhong Ziyi liked the feeling of standing next to Lin Yuan and the faint fragrance on his body. Coupled with Zhong Ziyi's love for combat, Zhong Ziyi felt that it was simply a kind of immortal enjoyment to be able to duel with Lin Yuan. At the same time, Zhong Ziyi also became 120% serious and looked at Lin Yuan. Since you said that this kind of flame strength is still far from enough, then the fire is going to heat up soon. The first time was even more intense. End of this chapter. Chapter 874. After saying that, Zhong Ziyi ordered the squeaking orange mouse on his shoulder. Sky burning roar, use flame conduction. After saying that, the little orange mouse's body suddenly ignited with a fiery light, and 2 orange flame marks appeared on top of the little orange mouse's head. One appeared on the reincarnation flame beast, which was struggling to get up after being knocked down by Lin Yuan. In an instant, the temperature on the arena rose, and even Lin Yuan suddenly felt the pressure of this temperature. Sweat immediately seeped out of Lin Yuan's body. However, it was not that Lin Yuan could not endure such heat, and he was not the slightest bit afraid or worried about the sudden increase in heat. Lin Yuan did not use the Princess Silk Dress's function to activate the Myth 3 Ice Flame Law engraved in it and the Gilded Flame Dragon Lyce's Burning Flame Law. Lin Yuan's current fire-type resistance was only a passive bonus of the Princess Silk Dress. After using true data to check the attributes of the Sky Burning Roar and the Reincarnation Flame Beast, Lin Yuan decided not to activate the fire-type law engraved in the Princess Silk Dress to increase his fire-type resistance. Due to the Reincarnation Flame Beast, he and Zhong Ziyi were destined to have a protracted battle. Fortunately, Lin Yuan was now a B-rank Spirit Qi professional. If he was still a C-rank Spirit Qi professional, he would be 1 rank lower than Zhong Ziyi. Then, Lin Yuan could only use his ultimate move in this battle. In Lin Yuan's opinion, this battle was also a test of his strength. Not only had he not trained many of his trump cards, but he had not even used them. As a result, Lin Yuan did not have a clear understanding of the strength of his trump cards. This was not a good thing for a Spirit Qi professional. Zhong Ziyi's Reincarnation Flame Beast had evolved from the Source Fire, which was similar to his contracted Source Sand. They were both elemental Source-type life forms. However, according to true data, the preconditions for the Source Fire and Source Sand's contracts were very different. The Source Fire had devoured a large number of metal spiritual ingredients and relied on the liquid metal to form a viscous lava-like body. The huge tiger-shaped Fey that had just formed from the lava-like body was the ability of the Reincarnation Flame Beast after it used Beast-type attachment and activated the Tiger-type Fey bloodline in its body. At that moment, the giant lava tiger, whose fire-type ability had increased, roared and charged at Lin Yuan again. Just like how Zhong Ziyi had not unleashed his full strength, Lin Yuan's earlier punch was just a probing attack. The exclusive skill, Spirit Purity Burst, was to gather Spirit Qi at one point to burst out with damage. The purer the Spirit Qi was, the higher the Spirit Purity Burst damage would be. The spirit qi in Lin Yuan's body had reached a certain purity. This time, Lin Yuan wasn't stingy with his spiritual power. He circulated a large amount of spiritual power and gathered it on his left fist. Lin Yuan's body reflexively reacted, and his nimble movement technique coupled with tricky angles allowed him to dodge the giant lava tiger's flaming attack. Lin had. And the Lin Yuan flame giant flame tear. Lin Yuan's merciless blow completely destroyed the lava giant tiger's form. The powerful explosive force penetrated the lava giant tiger's body and blasted a hole with squirming liquid lava. At that moment, the giant lava tiger roared furiously. A lava antelope with a sword's horn came out of the hole and charged at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's right fist seemed to have predicted the future. It had long gathered spiritual power and struck the lava antelope's horn. The reincarnation flame beast's lava antelope was blasted away. The deformed giant lava tiger and lava antelope split again and formed a lava cheetah. Lin Yuan knew that this was the result of the reincarnation flame beast's beast-type attachment and the exclusive skill, flame differentiation. With flame differentiation, as long as the reincarnation flame beast had enough beast-type Fey bloodline, it could continuously offset the damage. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and let his muscles relax. Immediately, he tensed up and leaped high into the air, waving his fist to attack. Liu Jie, who was very familiar with Lin Yuan, could not help but swallow his saliva. He did not expect Lin Yuan, who was usually sunny, to be so fierce when fighting in this way. Zhong Ziyi paid great attention to Lin Yuan's attack. Although the reincarnation flame beast could offset the damage with its exclusive skill, flame differentiation, Zhong Ziyi could feel the damage from Lin Yuan's punch. However, even if Zhong Ziyi commanded the reincarnated flame beast's giant lava tiger, lava antelope, and lava cheetah to dodge his fists, the reincarnated flame beast's giant lava tiger, lava antelope, and lava cheetah Lin Yuan would still use his nimble movement technique to chase after them and attack them. As for the giant lava tiger, lava antelope, and lava cheetah, Lin Yuan easily dodged them with his movement technique. Lin Yuan was not affected by the scorching flames, and the reincarnation flame beast's beast-type individual could not cause an effective physical attack on him. This gave Zhong Ziyi a headache. Lin Yuan was like a slippery catfish. A series of exchanges happened in the blink of an eye. When Lin Yuan punched a lava rhinoceros, it turned into an irregular lava body and did not split into a new individual. Lin Yuan smiled brightly and said, "It seems like your reincarnation flame beast has absorbed a total of 8 beast-type phase bloodlines. It seems that your reincarnation flame beast has absorbed a total of 8 types of beast-type phase bloodlines." While speaking, Lin Yuan's attacks were still very clean. During the battle, he landed a punch on each of the giant lava beasts. The 8 irregular lava bodies fell on the combat arena's ground and rolled, but they could not condense into a beast form. They were obviously seriously injured. Lin Yuan's spiritual power had also been depleted during the earlier fight. It could be said that Lin Yuan's spiritual power had dried up. Not only did Lin Yuan's punches land on the reincarnated flame beast's body, but they also seemed to hit the hearts of the top and veteran faction's younger generation in Yeong Palace's outer palace. At this moment, the noisy outer palace of Yeong Palace was dead silent. Everyone looked at Lin Yuan as if they were looking at an indescribable miracle. Zhong Ziyi looked at Lin Yuan's grave and stern face with a hint of a smile amidst the fanaticism. He was not worried about the reincarnation flame beast's injuries at all. Each of your punches will consume about 1/20th of a B-rank Spirit Chi professional's Spirit Chi. You have a total of 21 punches, so your body should be out of Spirit Chi now. Reincarnation flame beast, use reincarnation fire. At that moment, the orange mark on the orange mouse on Zhong Ziyi's shoulder became brighter. The body of the reincarnated flame beast that had been marked with an orange mark also ignited with a thin layer of orange flame. There was still one more night, so it would be later. End of this chapter. Chapter 875. The moment the orange flames ignited, the lump of lava that couldn't take shape immediately transformed into a giant lava tiger. With a roar from the giant lava tiger, the other 7 lumps of lava shot toward the giant lava tiger and fused into its body. It was as though all of Lin Yuan's previous attacks had been useless. Lin Yuan swung his fist. He had been nurturing phase and had not had the chance to exercise. Now that he had punched out, he felt refreshed. Upon hearing Zhong Zedi's words, Lin Yuan replied softly, "You're right. According to the total amount of spirit qi, my body's spirit qi should have dried up after 21 punches." As Lin Yuan spoke, it was as though a seal had been opened on his body. Majestic spirit qi flowed out of Lin Yuan's body and set off a gust of wind on the stage. All of a sudden, Zhong Ziyi felt his spirit qi circulation speed being suppressed. Zhong Ziyi frowned and looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief. It's spiritual pressure. When spirit qi was stimulated, the spirit qi professional's body would produce external pressure. However, even a Class A spirit qi professional's spirit qi burst would not be able to produce spiritual pressure that could be felt by others. Right now, Zhong Ziyi could clearly feel his spirit qi being suppressed. Zhong Ziyi could not imagine how much spirit qi was circulating in Lin Yuan's body. Due to Zhuo Ming's barrier, no one could sense Lin Yuan's spiritual pressure apart from Zhong Ziyi, who was fighting Lin Yuan on the stage. However, Zhong Zedi's words were clearly heard by everyone present. Lin Yuan had considered the pros and cons before activating the spirit qi imprint in his body. Just the sacred source lifeform reward for winning the civil and martial arena was enough for Lin Yuan to activate the spirit qi imprint that he had not used for a long time. Moreover, the civil and martial arena reward was a radiant medal. Today, Lin Yuan was going to let go of everything and fight with all his might. Zhong Ziyi felt the change in Lin Yuan's body and immediately gave the Reincarnation Flame Beast a new order. Reincarnation Flame Beast, use Beast Vein Fusion. Following Zhong Zedi's order, the Reincarnation Flame Beast that had just transformed into a giant lava tiger turned into an irregular lump of lava again. The magma ball wriggled rapidly, and as it wriggled, it grew larger and larger as the fire elemental energy burned. Finally, it condensed into a giant beast with the characteristics of 8 phase. The moment the giant beast condensed, it pounced straight at Lin Yuan. Since Lin Yuan had removed the spirit qi imprint, he had plenty of spirit qi to squander. This time, he didn't conserve it and gathered a massive amount of spirit qi on his fists. This caused his 2 arms to be vaguely wrapped in materialized spirit energy, and the wrapping of spirit energy caused the air around his fists to become distorted. However, just as Lin Yuan rushed toward the Reincarnation Flame Beast that had gathered 8 types of Fey bloodlines, he clearly felt the temperature of the Reincarnation Flame Beast's flames rising. If he still did not activate the princess's dress at this time, what awaited him would be a large area of burns on his body. Thus, when he rushed toward the Reincarnation Flame Beast, he quietly activated the princess's skirt. After Lin Yuan activated Princess Luo Kun, he felt as though he had returned to the feeling when he had just ascended to the combat arena. He couldn't even feel the heat in the surrounding air. This made Lin Yuan involuntarily sigh in his heart. As expected of the Myth 3 law power, just as Lin Yuan collided with the Reincarnation Flame Beast that had gathered 8 types of Fey bloodlines, he heard Zhong Ziyi shout, "Reincarnation Flame Beast, Flame Body Boil." Zhong Ziyi had also contracted a sacred source lifeform, so when Lin Yuan activated Princess Luo Kun, he could faintly feel the sacred source aura emerging from Lin Yuan's body. Zhong Ziyi wasn't surprised, as he had already guessed that Lin Yuan had contracted a sacred source lifeform. The fact that Lin Yuan had used a sacred source lifeform so quickly made Zhong Ziyi feel at ease. Zhong Ziyi would then use his Creation Master ability to investigate Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform's functions. Following Zhong Zedi's command for Flame Body Boil, the Reincarnation Flame Beast's fire elemental energy suddenly spewed out, but Lin Yuan was still unaffected. However, the Reincarnation Flame Beast seemed to have turned into a hedgehog as it spewed out a large amount of tiny lava balls from its body. These tiny balls of lava cooled in the air, forming all kinds of weapons that were burning red hot. Seeing this, Lin Yuan jumped back and abruptly pulled away. Then, he used all kinds of strange movement techniques to move around in the rain of weapons, occasionally swinging his fists. In such a rain of weapons, Lin Yuan could be said to be unscathed. At that moment, Lin Yuan didn't notice anything strange. However, everyone, including Zhong Ziyi, saw a faint image of a woman appear on Lin Yuan's body. This woman's image was nearly 10 meters tall. The woman in the image had her eyes closed, and her skirt fluttered in the wind. She stretched her arms forward as if to hug Lin Yuan. The woman's image made a gesture of wholeheartedly protecting him. The appearance of this woman's image broke the temporary peace in Yeang Palace's outer palace. This is definitely King's sacred source lifeform. Could it be that this sacred source lifeform allows Lin Yuan to be unscathed in this rain of weapons? After a series of exclamations, the younger generation spectators in Yeang Palace's outer palace began to discuss among themselves. Jiyu Lang and Sheng Yin were deep in thought. Both of them realized that they couldn't rely on their creation master strength to investigate the sacred source lifeform's abilities. All prying eyes seemed to be blocked by the thousands of strong and weak forces on the sacred source lifeform's body. The sacred source lifeform's aura could not be blocked by Zhuo Ming's barrier. Jiyu Lang could confirm that Lin Yuan's body definitely had the sacred source lifeform's aura that had just appeared. However, Lin Yuan's fire elemental resistance and exquisite movement techniques had already been displayed. He didn't just summon the sacred source lifeform. Unlike Jiyu Lang, who was deep in thought outside the battlefield, Zhong Ziyi, who was inside the battlefield, had already seen Lin Yuan dodge the rain of weapons. Then, he summoned a fairy source-type lifeform with azure blue flames on its body. The moment the fairy source-type lifeform appeared, the azure flames around the fairy suddenly retracted. Finally, it gathered in the gem on the fairy's forehead. At the same time, the reincarnation flame beast used the reincarnation ritual and activated its second exclusive skill, Lava Demon God, that had been sealed. The reincarnated flame beast seemed to have turned into a volcanic crater, continuously spewing out lava. Strange beastly shadows appeared from the lava from time to time, and they continuously bombarded Lin Yuan's half of the stage. While the reincarnation flame beast executed its exclusive skill, Lava Demon God, to attack indiscriminately, the azure blue gem on the little fairy's forehead that Zhong Ziyi had just summoned suddenly shot a gorgeous ray at Zhong Ziyi. It didn't give Lin Yuan any time to dodge, and he couldn't dodge in the rain. But the next scene made Zhong Ziyi's jaw drop. Lin Yuan, who had been hit by all the moves, was unharmed, but the fairy source-type lifeform, the blue venom flame puppet, that he had just summoned, was severely injured after launching its attack. Its spirited blue eyes lost their luster, and the two pairs of wings on its back stopped flapping. It fell from the sky onto the dark crystal floor of the stage. The third time. End of this chapter. Chapter 876. Zhong Ziyi was stunned for a moment when he saw the blue poison flame puppet's blue eyes lose their luster and the two pairs of wings on its back no longer flapping. Then, his pupils constricted as he looked at Lin Yuan. The fairy source-type lifeform, the blue poison flame puppet, could be said to be a special offense-type source-type lifeform that Zhong Ziyi had always valued. The azure blue flames on the blue poison flame puppet's body contained an extremely large amount of fire poison. The fire poison could immediately fill the target's cells with fire elements and evaporate the water in the cells, causing the target to be in a dehydrated state. The fierce fire poison would burn the dehydrated target into charcoal. At the same time, the blue poison flame puppet was also very good at spiritual attacks. What the blue poison flame puppet had shot through the gemstone in its forehead was its spiritual power attack ability, the blue rose ray. However, after the blue rose ray hit Lin Yuan, the blue poison flame puppet had suffered a backlash from releasing the blue rose ray, and its spiritual power had been severely injured. This was why the blue poison flame puppet had immediately entered a near-death state after releasing an attack. A spiritual backlash would only occur when an individual with weaker spiritual power attacked an individual with stronger spiritual power. Zhong Ziyi's fairy source-type blue poison flame puppet might only be Diamond 8 Fantasy 2, and its grade and quality were not as high as the reincarnated flame beast. However, as a fire and spiritual type fairy source-type lifeform, the blue poison flame puppet's spiritual power was more than 3 times that of the reincarnated flame beast. By relying on its spiritual power, the blue poison flame puppet could easily severely injure the reincarnated flame beast. In order to have such a strong backlash, Lin Yuan's spiritual power had to be at least 5 times higher than the blue poison flame puppet. However, in Zhong Ziyi's opinion, As a spirit chi professional, Lin Yuan's spiritual power could not be so strong. If Lin Yuan had such a strong spiritual power, he could contract hundreds or thousands of fays and nurture them. In that case, Lin Yuan only needed to summon all his contracted fays during the battle. Who could beat him if they ganged up on him? Such a huge spiritual power had already violated the upper limit of the human genetic model's spiritual power talent. At the same time, the moment the fairy source-type blue poison flame puppet attacked, its spiritual power would connect with Lin Yuan's spiritual power as the blue rose ray hit him. The moment it connected with Lin Yuan's spiritual power, the blue poison flame puppet entered an unprecedented state of fear. It was as if the blue poison flame puppet, as a subordinate, had unknowingly offended its superior. Zhong Zed's contracted blue poison flame puppet was an existence with an extremely noble bloodline among fairy source-type lifeforms. From the moment it hatched, it had 2 pairs of wings on its back, which meant it had 4 wings on its back. Apart from the rumored myth breed that had grown a 3rd pair of wings, the blue venom flame puppet's bloodline could be said to be the pinnacle of fairy source-type lifeforms. Even Zhong Zed's own master, Chef Supreme, had said that if the blue venom flame puppet continued to be nurtured, there was a high chance that it would grow a 3rd pair of wings. Fairy source-type lifeforms were a kind of rather special lifeform. When facing dragon species pressure and phoenix species pressure that came from phase bloodlines, they had a very strong resistance. In fact, it could basically ignore the phase bloodline pressure. However, when it came to the fairy bloodline, the fairy source-type lifeforms with a high bloodline had a strong control over the fairy source-type lifeforms with a low bloodline. In the previous battles, Zhong Zi had many advantages in this aspect. Zhong Zi secretly guessed in his heart, could Lin Yuan have a fairy source-type lifeform with 3 pairs of wings? After having this thought, Zhong Zi felt that it was rather nonsensical. Lin Yuan was now a B-rank spirit chi professional. Even if his contracted phase upper limit was the same as Zhong Z's, it would at most be a Diamond X Fantasy V Fei. In history, he had never heard of a fairy source-type lifeform below myth breed being able to grow 3 pairs of wings. Zhong Z's master, Chef Supreme, had done a lot of research on fairy source-type lifeforms, so Zhong Zi knew the importance of a fairy source-type lifeform's bloodline more than anyone else. If Lin Yuan really had a fairy source-type lifeform with 3 pairs of wings below myth breed, its value would be even more precious than an uncontracted sacred source lifeform. Not only that, but Zhong Zi could also determine that Lin Yuan had a very strong resistance to poison based on how unscathed he was. Fire poison damage was completely different from fire damage. One was poison damage that evolved from fire elements, while the other was pure fire damage. Ever since Zhong Zi had become a combat class spirit chi professional, he had never felt so depressed in a duel. As a spirit chi professional with an affinity for fire, Zhong Z's contracted phase were all fire-type phase due to the limitations of his talent. After his specialty, fire-type attacks, was restricted, Zhong Zi changed his attack method and suffered a greater loss. After Zhong Zi probed Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform, he realized that his life as a creation master seemed to have been in vain. This was not the first time Zhong Zi had tried to spy on someone else's sacred source lifeform. He had even been able to get a glimpse of his Chef Supreme's sacred source lifeform. However, Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform had been blocked by thousands of strong and weak energies, so he could not even get a glimpse of it. Zhong Zi secretly guessed that Lin Yuan's resistance to spiritual damage was very likely due to his sacred source lifeform's ability. Unlike Zhong Z's grave expression, Lin Yuan had a strange expression as he looked at the blue poison flame puppet that was on the verge of death. Zhong Z's attack just now had not been the slightest problem. The combination of moves had reached a near-perfect level. Even if Lin Yuan had extraordinary combat skills and movement techniques, he would still not be able to dodge it. The mistake was that Zhong Zi had used a spiritual attack on him. As a functional Fey, Genius did not have any combat abilities. However, it had massive spiritual energy that could memorize all the knowledge in the world. Such spiritual energy was not something that 1 or 2 spiritual type phase attacks could shake. Lin Yuan's spiritual energy and Genius' spiritual energy were connected according to Genius' spiritual expansion ability. The blue poison flame puppet's spiritual attack had only caused a small wave in Lin Yuan's spiritual sea. The waves did not roll far before they silently melted into the sea. Lin Yuan did not feel the fire poison damage from the blue poison flame puppet's blue rose ray. If he had known that the blue poison flame puppet's attack contained fire poison damage, Lin Yuan would definitely thank himself for upgrading his Myth 2 Vicious Poison Law to Myth 3. Zhong Zedi's sudden attack had allowed Lin Yuan to indirectly destroy one of Zhong Zedi's fays, which was definitely good news for Lin Yuan. First, even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 877. The younger generation of the veteran and peak forces were also stunned by this sudden turn of events. He did not understand why Zhong Zedi's fairy source-type lifeform would be so heavily injured. Seeing this scene, Ji Yulang's expression became more and more solemn. Ji Yulang took a deep look at Lin Yuan, but the more he looked, the more he felt that Lin Yuan was shrouded in layers of fog, making it impossible to see him clearly. The blue poison flame puppet was a fairy source-type lifeform that Zhong Zi had contracted and nurtured in the past 2 years. Ji Yulang had fought Zhong Zi a few times and had suffered quite a bit at the hands of the blue poison flame puppet. Ji Yulang's thorny problem had become Lin Yuan's method to restrain Zhong Zi. Through this unforeseen event, Ji Yulang also came to the same conclusion as Zhong Zi. He felt that Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform's function was related to spiritual energy protection. With a wave of his hand, Zhong Zi recalled the dying blue venom flame puppet and the reincarnated flame beast into his spiritual space. At that moment, the blue venom flame puppet had entered a near-death state and could no longer fight. The lava demon god state's reincarnation flame beast was also immune to Lin Yuan's attacks. Allowing the reincarnated flame beast to maintain its lava demon god state would only waste the spiritual energy in Zhong Zedi's body. After recalling the blue poison flame puppet and the reincarnation flame beast back into the spiritual spatial zone, Zhong Zi looked at Lin Yuan and said, "That's right. You are very strong. However, I am going to use my ultimate move." Zhong Zedi's tone did not become heavy because of the battle. Instead, it was filled with a sense of joy. This was something that even Zhong Zi himself did not feel. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan replied with a bright smile. "Just like you, I'm going to use my ultimate move." As he spoke, he looked at the sky-burning centipede on Zhong Zedi's shoulder and could not help but feel a little regretful. Under true data, the burning sky centipede's platinum skill, Group Flame Heart Flame, was a skill that targeted the mind and soul. Standing on Zhong Zedi's shoulder, the sky-burning who did not join the battle. Instead, it cast a support skill, Flame Conduction, on the reincarnated flame beast. He speculated that this heaven-burning centipede should be one of Zhong Zedi's trump cards. If the burning sky centipede were to use the platinum skill group Flaming Heart Flame on him, it would be countered by Lin Huang's mental strength. No matter how strong the burning sky centipede was, he would be eliminated. This way, he could directly destroy one of Zhong Zedi's trump cards. With the lesson of the fairy source-type lifeform, the blue venom flame puppet, Zhong Zi would probably not let the burning heaven centipede use the group Flame Heart Flame on him again. However, this was also good. This burning sky centipede's existence could let him deeply feel how powerful the young generation's pinnacle strength was. At that moment, Zhong Zi turned around and said to Zhuo Ming, "Senior Zhuo Ming, the attack will be out of my control, so I'll have to trouble you." Zhuo Ming's expression became even more serious. "Lord Zhong Zi, I will take good care of the situation in the arena. I will act immediately according to my judgment." The first half of Zhuo Ming's voice was normal, but in the second half, his voice changed. It had a hoarse and cold quality to it. Lin Yuan and Zhong Zi didn't sense the change in Zhuo Ming's aura because of the barrier. However, the younger generation of the top factions and veteran factions outside the arena felt as if a new world was quietly born in Yiyang Palace's inner palace. This newly born world was filled with desolation, as if all living things in this world were about to decay and decay. When they looked at Zhuo Ming again, they realized that Zhuo Ming, who originally had a human appearance, had a thick layer of earth and yellow armor. Fine and sharp thorns grew out of the armor, and a long tail curled up to the top of Zhuo Ming's head appeared behind him. Just by looking at this thick and long tail, one could feel the terrifying power contained within. It was as if the power of the tale could shatter the desolation world that had quietly descended in Yi Yang Palace's outer palace. Although Lin Yuan couldn't feel Zhuo Ming's aura, he noticed the changes on Zhuo Ming's body. Upon seeing Zhuo Ming's transformation, Lin Yuan immediately knew that Zhuo Ming had a fei that could possess him. Lin Yuan had seen spirit qi professionals with feis that could possess them before, and Xin Ying was one of them. Upon seeing Zhuo Ming's transformation, Lin Yuan let out a sigh of relief because he was about to use an unpredictable power. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard Zhong Ziyi give an order to the Burning Sky Centipede. Burning Sky Centipede, use the exclusive skill, Exceptional Flame 8 Refinements. Upon hearing Zhong Ziyi's order, the Burning Sky Centipede on Zhong Ziyi's shoulder suddenly leaped into the sky. With this leap, golden bristles grew on the Burning Sky Centipede's body that looked like an orange rat. After these golden bristles grew, they immediately ignited with 8 different colored flames. Immediately after, the 8 flames entered the Burning Sky Centipede's mouth as it sucked in all of a sudden. Immediately after, the 8 colored flames on the Burning Sky Centipede's body seemed to have fused together and turned into a magnificent glazed color. Immediately after, the Burning Sky Centipede opened its mouth and spat out a bundle of intertwined flames at Lin Yuan. At that moment, someone below the arena suddenly shouted, F***CK. It's actually 8 kinds of high-grade exceptional flame. It's actually 8 kinds of high-grade exceptional flames. Even a suzerain fei wouldn't be able to withstand the damage from 8 kinds of high-grade exceptional flames. As Zhong Ziyi's opponent, Lin Yuan naturally saw what the 8 flames on the Burning Sky Centipede's back were. Facing the menacing flame attack, Lin Yuan planned to test his ethereal jellyfish diamond ability, Spatial Shift. Lin Yuan did not summon the ethereal jellyfish. If he did, the ethereal jellyfish's chubby body would probably be roasted into jellyfish jerky by the arena's high temperature. Therefore, he relied on his body to casually execute spatial transference. However, the ethereal jellyfish was a Diamond X Legend Fey and had yet to become a fantasy breed. In other words, the ethereal jellyfish strength was only equivalent to a Platinum X Fantasy I Fey. Even if the ethereal jellyfish spatial shift had a strong protective effect against elemental damage, it could circle out the space that was purely filled with elemental energy within a certain range and transfer the space to another dimension. However, there was a limit to the elemental energy that the ethereal jellyfish spatial shift could circle out. If there was too much elemental energy, the space would be broken. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not release the ethereal jellyfish spatial shift once. Facing the Burning Sky Centipede's menacing attack formed by the fusion of 2 Class 8 exceptional flames, Lin Yuan waved his hand and released 30 spatial shifts. Anyway, Lin Yuan had stimulated the spirit qi imprint, and he had plenty of spiritual power in his body that could not be used up. Now, Lin Yuan perfectly interpreted what it meant to have spirit qi and be willful. Under everyone's gaze, Zhong Ziyi's 2 high-grade exceptional flames attack was like a fat pig thrown into the sea in front of Lin Yuan, immediately disappearing without a trace. The second one was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 878. Before everyone could be surprised, the heaven-burning centipede's next attack arrived in front of Lin Yuan. When Lin Yuan had checked the heaven-burning centipede's true data, he knew that its exclusive skill, 8 refinements of exceptional flame, was to use 8 different flames to combine and increase the damage 8 times. Therefore, Lin Yuan was already mentally prepared. The number of times Lin Yuan released the ethereal jellyfish's diamond spatial transfer kept multiplying. 30 times, 60 times, 120 times, 240 times, 480 times, 960 times, 1,920 times, 3,840 times. The heaven-burning centipede's 8 refinements of exceptional flame's 8 attacks were like flowers in a mirror and the moon in the water. Even Zhong Ziyi's expression turned sluggish, and he looked at Lin Yuan with eyes full of disbelief. The younger generation of the top factions and veteran factions outside the arena could no longer hold it in and shouted Lin Yuan's name. Lin Yuan was strong, and so was Zhong Ziyi. However, Zhong Ziyi's strength had always been traceable, and the Fei's abilities could also be seen clearly. However, Lin Yuan's series of actions had broken the original understanding of the younger generation. They did not expect that a battle could be fought like this. If Lin Yuan's current strength was given by Fays, the younger generation of the top factions could not help but think in their hearts. If Lin Yuan summoned these Fays, how powerful would they be? After all, when a spirit chi professional used an ability without summoning Fays, the ability's effect would be greatly reduced. If Lin Yuan knew what the younger generation of the veteran factions and top factions were thinking, he would probably laugh awkwardly. If he had summoned Little Black, Genius, and the ethereal jellyfish, Little Black, Genius, and the ethereal jellyfish would have been turned into ashes by Zhong Zi's probing attack. The only reason he was able to persevere in the arena until now was because of the resistance provided by the Princess Robe's law. This resistance would not be added to Lin Yuan's phase through the contract. Although Lin Yuan's method of turning the 8 refinements of exceptional flames damage into nothingness looked a little shocking, only Lin Yuan knew the pain. Even if he activated the spirit chi imprint, the nearly 7,600 spatial transfers had basically exhausted the accumulated spiritual power in the spirit chi imprint. Lin Yuan did not have any excess spiritual power to waste. After a brief daze, Zhong Zi stretched out his palm and stretched forward. A scarlet color appeared on Zhong Zi's palm, and Lin Yuan immediately sensed the sacred source's aura. At that moment, Zhong Zi looked up and instructed the heaven-burning roar. Land of Fire Fantasy. As soon as the words Fire Fantasy Village were uttered, the sky-burning centipede let out a roar that resounded through the outer palace of the Night Palace. Balls of strange flames gushed out from the heaven-burning whose body. These strange flames turned into colorful bricks and tiles in the air. Between the bricks and tiles, it was as if the entire martial arena had been forged into a majestic city made of flames. Magnificent flame flowers swayed in the air in the city. Lin Yuan knew that each flame flower was a flame characteristic left behind after a strange flame had been absorbed. However, the Burning Sky Centipede's exclusive skill, Fire Fantasy Town, was filled with tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of fire characteristics. The characteristics of these flames intertwined together, forming the embryonic form of a world of flames. Lin Yuan, who was in the Fire Fantasy Town, still felt an indescribable heat and burning pain even after activating the Princess Dress's Cold Flame Law and the Gilded Flame Dragon Lyce's Burning Flame Law. Lin Yuan's skin ached under the roasting of the fire elements. Under the roasting of the fire element, Lin Yuan could feel his sweat exuding a strong smell of blood. At that moment, Zhong Zi was like a god in the world of flames. As they watched Lin Yuan's skin continuously ooze blood, everyone felt that Lin Yuan was going to stop here. On one hand, Lin Yuan was too young, and on the other hand, his sacred source lifeform had been activated. However, this sacred source lifeform could not protect Lin Yuan as dutifully as the arms that were hugging him. At that moment, everyone saw Lin Yuan reach forward, just like Zhong Zi. However, Lin Yuan did not spread his palm forward. Instead, he made a grasping motion. Everyone saw the woman's illusory figure behind Lin Yuan suddenly become solid, and the woman's closed eyes quietly opened. The moment the woman opened her eyes, the 10-meter-tall woman's phantom behind Lin Yuan disappeared. Immediately after, a slender sword appeared in Lin Yuan's hand. The sword's scabbard depicted the woman in a fluttering dress. The dress seemed to be nurturing a magical world. Looking at the long sword in Lin Yuan's hand, it wasn't just the outer palace that was stirred up. Even the outer palace was stirred up. At that moment, the calm voice was filled with interest and surprise. How exciting! This young fellow has exceeded this old man's expectations. The Moon Empress' eyes flickered, showing that her heart was not calm. As the Moon Empress sat on the throne, Cold Moon and Dark Moon behind her could not see her flickering eyes. Otherwise, they would immediately know that the Moon Empress' heart was in turmoil. Otherwise, her eyes would not have flickered at all. The experts in the inner palace who had contracted a sacred source lifeform could feel that Lin Yuan's sacred source aura had not changed. Even if the sacred source lifeform had changed, it was still a sacred source lifeform. However, the top factions and veteran leaders who had not contracted a sacred source lifeform were looking at Lin Yuan in shock. At the same time, they secretly cast glances at the Moon Empress. They did not understand how a 17-year-old youth like Lin Yuan could contract two sacred source lifeforms at the same time. Chef Supreme looked at the Moon Empress with surprise and said, "Moon Empress, you taught your disciple well." When the Moon Empress heard Chef Supreme's words, her expression immediately became strange. She glanced at Chef Supreme, feeling that he was targeting her. Apart from the usual question and answer session that happened once every 2 weeks, the Moon Empress could not remember what else she had taught Lin Yuan. Hence, although Chef Supreme's words were meant to be good, the Moon Empress felt that he was picking on her. Hence, although Chef Supreme's words were meant to be a compliment, the Moon Empress felt that he was picking on her. The Moon Empress looked at Lin Yuan, whose body was bleeding from the roasting, and said to Chef Supreme, "Not like you. Unlike you, all the disciples you've accepted are so worry-free." Chef Supreme's face lit up when he heard that. Chef Supreme thought back to what he had just said and did not feel that there was anything wrong with what he had said. Could it be that the Moon Empress was angry because Lin Yuan did not perform well? On the stage, Zhongzi raised his hand high. The red color in his palm was like a burning torch in the center of a world of flames. The moment the crimson flame changed, Lin Yuan drew the sacred sword sealed in the scabbard. Third time. End of this chapter. Chapter 879. The bamboo monarch, who had been quietly sitting on the chair in the inner palace, looked at Lin Yuan with an expression of admiration. The bamboo monarch was different from Chef Supreme. Chef Supreme had only seen Lin Yuan in the Radiant Moon Palace a dozen days ago, but the bamboo monarch had already seen Lin Yuan half a year ago in the royal capital's outskirts. At that time, Lin Yuan had been in a sorry state, covered in blood as he stood behind the Moon Empress. He had almost been killed by Cheng Wu. He had looked so young and immature. It had only been half a year, and that immature youth had already grown to such a level. Moon Empress, your disciple's sacred source lifeform is quite interesting. I can sense that the sacred source lifeform is only a 2-star lifeform, but it seems to have more than one function. As one of the 3 Class 5 creation masters, the bamboo monarch's ability to detect sacred source lifeforms was far superior to Zhongzi and Jiyu Lang. The bamboo monarch had immediately probed Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform the moment he activated it. Like the other low-class creation masters, the bamboo monarch could sense that there were thousands of barriers on the surface of Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform. These barriers prevented the bamboo monarch's spiritual energy from penetrating it. However, when the bamboo monarch activated his comprehended willpower, his willpower evolved into laws, and the laws evolved into a world. The bamboo monarch realized that willpower, laws, and worlds could penetrate the barriers on the surface of Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform, so the bamboo monarch did the same. However, after breaking through a few hundred weak barriers, the bamboo monarch realized that his world power had encountered a thick layer of obstruction. This thick barrier was even more solid than the weak barriers from before. However, it was easy for the bamboo monarch to use the world power to break through this barrier. However, the bamboo monarch was not sure if his invasive probing would affect Lin Yuan. If his probing really affected Lin Yuan, the Moon Empress wouldn't let him off. Therefore, the bamboo monarch suppressed his curiosity and chose to ask the Moon Empress instead. The Moon Empress did not answer the bamboo monarch's question. Instead, she changed the topic. Chef Supreme's disciple's sacred source lifeform has already reached 3-star and is at the critical point of 4-star. He only needs an opportunity to break through 4-star and transform from the infant stage into the growth stage. I believe that Zhongzi's battle with Lin Yuan is a good opportunity. The Moon Empress did not wish to discuss Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform with the bamboo monarch. The woman that had appeared behind Lin Yuan was his sacred source lifeform, and the sword that the woman had turned into was also his sacred source lifeform. These two completely different sacred source lifeforms had the same sacred source aura, so they were definitely the same type of sacred source lifeform. This meant that Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform had 2 forms, which the Moon Empress had never encountered before. When the Moon Empress had seen him in the Radiant Moon Palace, she had discovered that he had the ability to hide his spirit chi professional rank. Now that he thought about it, Lin Yuan's ability to hide his identity as a spirit chi professional should be the same as a sacred source lifeform's ability to block detection. In addition, he had displayed fire and poison elemental immunity, spiritual protection, and his current attacking stance. The Moon Empress did not know what was going on without carefully inspecting Lin Yuan's sacred source lifeform. However, the Moon Empress had always adhered to a principle when it came to educating Lin Yuan. It was fine as long as one knew the trump card, and there was no need to reveal it to others. This was also why the Moon Empress had never asked about Lin Yuan's strength. Just now, the Moon Empress had sensed the Bamboo Monarch probing Lin Yuan. It was fortunate that the Bamboo Monarch didn't continue probing after encountering an obstruction. Otherwise, the Moon Empress would have already made a move on the Bamboo Monarch and interrupted his probing. Chef Supreme was originally puzzled as to why the Moon Empress had suddenly rebuked him. However, when he recalled the Moon Empress' temperament, he didn't pay much attention to it. Upon hearing the Moon Empress praise, Chef Supreme Zhongzi said with a smile, "If Zhongzi can increase the sacred source lifeform star rank in this battle, it will evolve from the infant stage to the adult stage and obtain new abilities. Then I really have to thank Lin Yuan for creating such a good opportunity for Zhongzi." Liu Jie could feel the sacred source aura from Lin Yuan and Zhongzi's bodies. He could feel the sacred source lifeforms in his body stirring. Based on his conversation with the sacred source lifeform, Liu Jie knew that Zhongzi's sacred source lifeform star was higher than Lin Yuan's. Jiyu Lang turned to look at Liu Jie as the sacred source lifeform in his body stirred restlessly. Zhongzi's sacred source lifeform is very strong. It's a pure combat type sacred source lifeform. My sacred source lifeform has already reached class 4 and obtained its second ability. However, in terms of sacred source lifeforms, my sacred source lifeform is completely suppressed by Zhongzi's sacred source lifeform. Senior Zhuo Ming will be busy from now on. As Jiyu Lang spoke, Zhongzi's voice sounded in the arena. Zhongzi's voice was filled with solemnity and even a hint of holiness. Heaven's crimson flames, crimson flame heavenly country. As Zhongzi shouted, the flames floating in the air of the fire fantasy country seemed to be on a pilgrimage. The characteristics of each flame condensed into a resplendent beam of light that shot toward the crimson flame in Zhongzi's hand. The flames floating in the air of the fire fantasy country were the residual characteristics of an alien flame after it was absorbed. After the flames absorbed the fire characteristics of the origin, the remaining parts became vigorous fire elements that nourished the bricks and tiles of the fire fantasy country. Every brick and tile of the fire fantasy country was indeed made of alien flames. After these alien flames absorbed the fire elements left behind by the flames started to move. The fire from the bricks and tiles began to jump, and finally, the jumping fire turned into a dancing flame. The temperature of the fire fantasy country suddenly increased by more than one-fold. Zhuo Ming sensed that the temperature in the fire fantasy country had risen to Lin Yuan's limit and was about to protect him. Zhuo Ming felt as though Lin Yuan had instantly turned into a towering mountain standing in the world of flames. It was as though the mountain was pure green, untainted by 10,000 fires. A majestic vitality suddenly gushed out of Lin Yuan's body and swam in it. After the rising temperature of the flames destroyed Lin Yuan's body turned pale. After the rising temperature of the flames destroyed Lin Yuan's body, the majestic vitality allowed Lin Yuan's burned body to regenerate. Lin Yuan had already activated the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill, Life Imprint. Lin Yuan sighed in his heart. The Cold Snow Pine's Cold Flame Law is a Myth 3 law and has the characteristics of ice and fire. But the Cold Flame Law's ice element characteristic is obviously higher than the fire element's resistance. Lin Yuan felt that if the princess's skirt was engraved with a pure Myth 3 fire element law, he would not have had to activate the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill, Life Imprint. The first was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 880. Zhuo Ming, who had already entered the arena, retreated awkwardly when he saw Lin Yuan's skin, which had been damaged by the flames, and immediately recovered. Zhuo Ming felt that he had learned something new. This big shot's disciple really had endless trump card. Every trump card could have a serious impact on the balance of the battle. Suddenly, Lin Yuan felt the exceptional fire in the fire fantasy country under his feet start to become violent. The crimson color in Zhongzi's hand was like a singularity, and its gravitational force shattered half of the bricks and tiles that constructed the fire fantasy country. The shattered bricks and tiles poured into the crimson color, causing it to expand in Zhong Zed's palm and evolve into a kingdom of crisscrossing crimson flames. After this crimson kingdom was formed, Zhong Zi shook his wrist and threw it toward Lin Yuan. While Zhong Zi was condensing the crimson kingdom, Lin Yuan had used Morbius True Data to examine Zhong Zed's sacred source lifeform. Zhong Zed's sacred source lifeform was called the Heaven's Crimson Fire. Its current function was to condense the fire characteristics and fire elements in the strange flames into the fire law in an instant. Zhong Zed's red flame heavenly country contained a complete fire law formed by the characteristics of nearly 100,000 flames. Although this rule could only be condensed for a split second, it truly existed. In this age where the younger generation was still controlling fantasy breed phase, Zhong Zed's use of the law could be said to be a dimensional reduction attack. But to Lin Yuan, Princess was the true expert at playing with willpower and laws. Princess, who had always played with willpower and laws, now had a new toy at the level of the Dark Death world. After weighing the pros and cons, Lin Yuan injected the Myth 3 Nightmare Dream law inscribed in the princess dress into the sacred sword in his hand. This was the first time Lin Yuan used the princess sacred sword's function, the sacred sword's tip. As Lin Yuan injected the Nightmare Dream law into the sacred sword, the ordinary sacred sword in his hand suddenly turned grayish-black, and a grayish-black mist rose from the sword tip. The mist seemed to hide a bat that was waiting for an opportunity to suck people's sweet dreams. Immediately after, he held the sword in a reverse grip and shook it. All the grayish-black swamp in the sword in his hand gathered at the tip of the sword. If the scarlet light in Zhong Zed's palm was the core of the fire illusion country, then the sacred source lifeform's Heaven's Crimson Fire Kingdom transcended the fire illusion country. In that case, the grayish-black color entangled on the tip of Lin Yuan's sword could already compete with the red flame heaven formed by the Heaven's Crimson Fire in Zhong Zed's palm. In the fog, a faintly discernible dark bat was howling at the entire world of flames. Then, he swung his sword and struck out the Myth 3 Nightmare law condensed at the tip of the sword. The grayish-black mist collided with the kingdom of fire that Zhong Zi had thrown over. The grayish-black mist and the crimson mist alternated, making it impossible for the younger generation of Yiyang Palace, including Jiyu Lang, to see the situation on the stage. After a long time, the grayish-black and scarlet colors cancelled each other out. Lin Yuan and Zhong Zi stood there, panting heavily. It was obvious that they had suffered quite a bit from the battle just now. The veteran faction prodigies and top faction prodigies who were spectating all had their mouths wide open. They stared in disbelief at the two people standing on the stage. An elegant-looking girl standing beside Sheng Yin could not help but curse at this moment. F***CK, is this the damage that AF** King youngster can do? Are these two monsters? The fight between Lin Yuan and Zhong Zi had been too impactful, causing the outer palace to be in a dead silence. This made the girl's ridicule even more obvious. The elegant girl next to Sheng Yin also reacted at that moment. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to dig a hole in the ground. It was fine if the girls complained about it in private, but it was a different story if they said it in public. It could be said that although her exclamation just now was not malicious, it was already equivalent to disrespecting Zhong Zi and Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan was fine, but Zhong Zi was Chef Supreme's disciple. She had said that Zhong Zi was not a human and that Zhong Zi was a monster. If someone with ulterior motives were to make a fuss about it, he would be in for a hard time. The elegant girl next to Sheng Yin secretly glanced around and realized that no one was looking at her. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. Their gazes were fixed on the two shining men on the stage. She saw a few top faction young masters, who she had always thought were very handsome, gaping at the two people on the stage. The girl suddenly felt that there was nothing to be fascinated about with these top faction young masters. The girl continued to look at Lin Yuan and Zhong Zi, who were in the combat arena. This glance made the girl feel conflicted. Both of them were so outstanding, and she did not know who to like. But if these two people could be together, it seemed like, just as a mysterious smile appeared on the girl's face, she heard a coquettish voice beside her ear. "Qianhui, are you hungry? Wipe your saliva." Zhuang Qianhui hurriedly closed her mouth and subconsciously sucked, but she did not expect to let out a slurping sound. At that moment, the majestic vitality in Lin Yuan's body was flowing rapidly, helping Lin Yuan repair his damaged body. The aftermath of the grayish-black and crimson collision had dissipated, and he looked evenly matched with Zhong Ziyi. However, Lin Yuan knew that he was the one at a disadvantage in the collision. During the collision, his body was constantly being eroded by the fire law's power. Thanks to the princess robe's fire resistance and the massive vitality, he had survived. Logically speaking, Zhong Ziyi's sacred source lifeform, the heaven's crimson fire, relied on nearly 100,000 fire characteristics and fire elemental energy to form the fire law. It was at most at Myth I. Even with the burning sky whose exclusive skill, Fire Fantasy Town, which doubled its power, it would not reach Myth II. On the other hand, the nightmare dream law that Lin Yuan used was a Myth III existence. Logically speaking, the grayish-black color should crush the scarlet color. However, the princess robe's law was very different from the heaven's crimson fire's law. What Lin Yuan had just unleashed was not the complete nightmare law but the Myth III nightmare law's energy. After a period of charging, Lin Yuan could use the Myth III nightmare law to unleash such an energy attack again. Zhong Ziyi's sacred source lifeform, the heaven's crimson fire, had condensed a complete law, but Zhong Ziyi had sacrificed it. The explosive power produced by sacrificing the law was not on the same level as simply using the law's energy. The second was even worse. End of this chapter.